Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to call the 8th meeting of the Planning and Environment Committee to order. Please check the city website for additional meeting detail information. Meetings can be viewed via live streaming on YouTube and city website. The City of London is situated on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape-Wauk, and Attawadron. We honor and respect the history, languages, and culture of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home. The City of London is currently home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit today. As representatives of the City of London, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for meetings upon request. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact PAC at london.ca or 519-661-2489 extension 2425. At this time, I'll look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, I'll move on to the consent items. I'll ask if any member would like to any of these pulled. Okay. Seeing none, then I'll look for a motion to put these on the floor. Councillor Rahman, seconded by Councillor Frank. I'll open that to the floor for committee. For any questions or comments? Or visiting councillors, of which we have a few today. Okay, seeing none, then we have a motion moved and seconded. Now I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to scheduled items, our first item 3.1 is for a request for delegation status for Upper Thames River Conservation Authority. I'll look for a motion from committee members to for that request. Councillor Rahman has motion, seconded by Councillor Frank, and I'll call that vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. So the delegate from the Conservation Authority, there we are. Okay, I was looking for you up in the. Please go ahead, and you have 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Chair Lehman, and also thank you to PAC committee members and visiting councillors. I'm Tracy Annett. I'm the General Manager of the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, and with me today is Jenna Elaine, who is our Manager of Environmental Planning and Regulations. We did circulate a slide deck. That slide deck is primarily the same information that we're going to be sharing with the Customer Service and Process Improvement Group tomorrow, and thank you for that recommendation that came out of PAC for having us join that group as well. So through the slides, the first slide in the deck would really just talk about the Upper Thames watershed and recognizing we're over 3,400 square kilometers and almost 600,000 residents within our watershed jurisdiction with that mix of rural and urban land uses. We have 17 member municipalities, 15 members that sit on our board, 4 of which are from the City of London and appointed from the City of London. We also have our board of directors, again, those overall group that set our board policies and direction. They're really responsive to our local issues and concerns. Each conservation authority, there's 36 across the province, they all have very different issues. I guess fortunately we don't have shorelines to deal with, where many of our counterparts do. The next slide just gives a little bit of background about the Conservation Authorities Act. We're governed under that act by and administered under the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, and it was originally established in 1946. At that time, significant flood events and erosion issues were what led to the formation of conservation authorities. We've had a number of changes since that time, and that's what we're talking about today, mostly related since 2021, and those changes that are made under the Act and then resulting changes to regulation. We have mandatory programs and services now that are categorized by Category 1. Again, those are anything related to natural hazards, drinking water source protection, provincial water quality monitoring, as well as our land management activities for passive uses. We have Category 2 programs and services that are requirements of municipalities, but they may ask us to undertake. We do risk management for drinking water source protection, and also an ESA contract for the City of London is a great example. Category 3 programs and services go well beyond what's mandatory, but again, look at that broader watershed approach, broader, more intensive water quality analysis, looking at communications and outreach, and other land management activities. So with the next slide, we touch a little bit on those mandatory programs, but highlighting those that are related to risk of natural hazards. When looking at mandatory programs and services, this has long been the goals of conservation authorities. It's been a part of our programs and services and core to what we do for many, many years. And that's also not only in regulation under the Planning Act, under the Conservation Authorities Act, requirements for those commenting under the Planning Act, but then also our regulation and our regulatory authorities. As well, we have an MOU with the province to provide that natural hazard commenting of provincial interests under the Planning Act as well. So with that, when we're dealing with the administration of our regulation, those hazard areas are our flooding concerns, our erosion concerns, wetlands. They act as sponges on the landscape to hold back floodwaters, the entire river and stream valley systems, and then also those that are adjacent to those inland lakes and watercourses. And there could be other areas deemed by regulation, those areas adjacent to wetlands, for example. So I'll pass it over to Jenna to talk a little bit about the changes since this year.
Okay, so changes were proposed as part of the province's Bill 23, the More Homes Built Faster Act, back in the fall of 2022 that recently took effect. So as of April 1st, the entirety of Section 28 of the Conservation Authorities Act was repealed and replaced with a new Section 28. Additionally, each conservation authority in Ontario had their own Section 28 regulation, which guided that regulatory role and responsibility for natural hazards. All 36 of those regulations were repealed and replaced by one single regulation that guides all conservation authorities in Ontario. There was a significant amount of administrative changes as a result of that new Section 28 and new regulation, but I just wanted to highlight a few of those key changes, one being the definition of a watercourse. So conservation authorities previously regulated watercourses that met the definition of an identifiable depression in the ground in which a flow of water regularly or continuously occurs. Watercourses are now have to be a defined channel having a bed and banks. So that's one key change. The other was the area that conservation authorities regulate around wetlands. So previously, we regulated 120 meters around all provincially significant wetlands, as well as wetlands greater than 2 hectares, and 30 meters around all other wetlands. We now just regulate 30 meters around all wetlands, regardless of their significance or size. While we recognize that there's always more work to do and we continue to strive for continued improvements to our customer service delivery, we have been undertaking process improvement changes to reflect the changes in legislation, as well as to try and meet the growth and demand in the development industry. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of the things we've been working on. Like many agencies in the development industry, we have been challenged with finding and retaining experienced and qualified staff. So we've made some structural changes to allow for some more junior positions to meet kind of the applicants we've been receiving for vacant positions, as well as increasing our capacity and allowing for some growth within our structure in our planning and regulatory department. We've updated our digital filing system to create a more streamlined and organized approach to data management. And we've made improvements to our documentation, including internal and external guidance and training materials. We also wanted to highlight the fact that over the last few years, we've seen steady improvements to our timelines for the review and issuance of our Section 28 permits. So in 2021, we met the provincial timelines, which is 30 days for minor permits and 90 days for major permits 91% of the time, and our service delivery targets, which are shorter timelines, 76% of the time. In 2022, we increased that to 92% of the provincial timelines and 86% of our service delivery targets. And as of last year, we achieved the provincial timelines 98% of the time, and our service delivery targets 94% of the time. So seeing improvements year over year, and that's been with increases we've seen to the number of actual permits we're issuing. So increases in the amount of workload we're seeing, and as well as increasing our timelines for delivery. Next, we just wanted to point out a bit of a good news story that's involved the City of London, which was the approval of a two-zone concept for the Mud Creek subwatershed. So floodplains typically considered as one regulated zone, but provincial direction allows for two zones in urban growth areas where specific criteria can be met. And two zones consist of a floodway and flood fringe areas on either side of that floodway. And it allows for some development to happen within those flood fringe areas. So the city has been undertaking a lot of work in the Mud Creek subwatershed to improve channel conveyance, which has alleviated the existing and future flooding concerns in that area. So our board of directors recently approved that floodplain two-zone concept approach on April 16th of this year. We did want to point out a few opportunities for further collaboration and engagement coming up. As a result of our regulatory changes and legislative changes, we will be updating our and releasing a new policy document that guides our regulatory authorities. So we're planning to release those drafts in June and July, and engaging the public, our municipalities, and working groups over the summer and early fall. We're also planning to take out the first phase of our hazard mapping for consultation beginning in October. Finally, we just wanted to finish with reference to the new proposed provincial planning statement. In section 5.2, the natural hazards section, it states that planning authorities shall, in collaboration with conservation authorities, identify hazardous lands and hazardous sites and manage development in these areas in accordance with provincial guidance. So we just wanted to close with saying that we look forward to our continued partnership with the city and continued collaboration to meet those provincial objectives.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Any questions now from committee members or visiting councilors? Okay, seeing none, I'll just say from the chair, thank you for coming today. I know the challenges presented by changes in legislation obviously are affects our work here at City Hall. We know that adds to the complexity as you shift to adjust to the new legislation. I just want to talk about collaboration. I feel that's very important. I met with the chair of the Conservation Authority. We talked about that. I think the city has made great strides in their collaborative efforts with the development industry, and I look forward to seeing that same happen with the Conservation Authority. So I'm glad that you raised that. The question for me is, have you reached out to those that develop, like, for example, LDI or the London Home Builders Association, to sit down with them and kind of explain how the new legislation affects you and therefore affects, you know, the relationship that you have with those that rely on your expertise to build communities safely?
Yes, to you, Chair. I'm happy to report that I gave a presentation to LDI just last week. I spent quite a bit of time there on Tuesday morning, I believe. And we had some good kind of open discussion around that table. They had lots of questions for me, and I think we agreed to kind of continue sort of regularly meeting with that group, and they're very interested in our consultation opportunities coming up through the summer and fall.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. That's terrific. As we try to build more homes faster, this collaboration is essential to get to our target of 40,000 units by 2031. So thank you. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for the good work that you do.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 3.2. Regarding 50 North Center Road, I'll look for a motion to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Robbins, seconded by Councillor Frank. I'll call that vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Any questions of a technical nature for staff, committee members at this time? Seeing none, I'll look for the applicant, if the applicant would like to address the committee. Please, ma'am, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Laura Jameson. I am a planner with Zelenka Priamo here on behalf of the applicant, Rock Developments. First and foremost, we'd like to thank staff for their work here on this project. They were able to answer a lot of questions behind the scenes that we had regarding the application, and we're pleased with the positive recommendation that's in front of you here today. Ultimately, we are hoping to add an additional commercial recreation use to an existing site. No physical development is proposed exterior to the building. All of the changes will be happening interior, just so that we can further intensify this commercial plaza. As mentioned, we're pleased with the staff recommendation for approval, and I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address the committee? I'll ask the clerk if there's anyone online. There's no one online. I don't see anyone in the gallery wishing to comment. Then I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Councillor Rahman, seconded by Councillor Frank, and I'll call that vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, I'll put that on the floor. Councillor Frank?
Thank you. I'll move the staff recommendation.
You got a seconder, Councillor Rahman. We have a motion moved and seconded. Any comments or questions? Councillor Pribble.
Very brief, as a board council, very much supportive in this application and rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
So moving on to 3.3, this is regarding 743 Wellington Road. I'll look for a motion to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Frank, seconded by Councillor Rahman, and we'll vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Questions of a technical nature for staff? Seeing none, then I'll look for the applicant. If they'd like to address the committee, please, sir, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. My name is Harry Frusios. I'm with Zelenka Priamo Limited. I'm here this afternoon with my colleague Aaliyah Richards and Mr. Ross Rains from the Focal Point Group, who's the applicant. Good afternoon to everyone, and also to the neighbors that are here this afternoon to provide comments on this application. I wanted to thank staff for their efforts in providing a positive staff report and for processing this application in a very timely fashion. It's a very critical application to get someone involved into this building as soon as possible. And the main purpose of this application, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, is to add certain uses to the existing restricted office zone that will enable our client to occupy the existing building, which has sat vacant for the past 4 years. On the surface, this is a very straightforward application because all we're doing is expanding the range of permitted uses to make it more viable under existing market conditions. Our client, Focal Point Group, is a local business that provides office space for several different types of uses, including nonprofit organizations, and you will hear from Mr. Rains as part of the public input process. However, in this situation, it was our client's original intent to offer this site as a potential hub location to assist in addressing the needs of the homeless. We acknowledge that this application before you this afternoon is not for a hub. There's a separate process for that can be done at a separate time, and that is applicable to any area within the city. However, our client chose to be fully transparent in this situation with their intentions for the property from the onset, which is why the application is being linked to a potential hub location. We've had 2 separate meetings with the neighbors, and to receive their comments on this application, we thank them. We thank them for attending these meetings and providing their feedback. It's clear that there's significant concerns with the placement of, and opposition with the placement of a hub at this location. and the concerns of the neighborhood are well documented towards the end of the staff report. We wish to advise committee that we are no longer, our client is no longer pursuing the hub at this location, as the process and timing to secure the necessary approvals just don't align with our client's needs to have this building occupied in a timely fashion. However, we do want to proceed with consideration of the additional permitted uses as proposed in our amended application and as recommended for approval by staff. I will note that the proposed uses that are for consideration are those which are already considered appropriate under the restricted office zoning category and are consistent with the intent of the London plan for this site. I will also note that we're not seeking to add uses that, or I would say the primary uses that are considered appropriate under the rapid transit corridor, which would be a mixed-use high-rise building. We're not asking for that, simply because our client is interested right now in occupying the existing building as soon as possible and having a wider range of uses allowable for that purpose. So therefore, we do concur with the planning analysis that was provided by planning staff and the recommendation to approve the application. And we respectfully request that Planning Committee endorse this application and send it to Council for approval, or for consideration for approval. On that note, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm available for any questions that you may have, either now or even after other comments have been made. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the public. Please go to the mic. And you can give us your name, and you have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Nikola Pasek. I live on Eden Ave. Okay, so here's my statement. I am not going to rob you today. If somebody came to your door and said that to you, what would you think? The emphasis is on today. You'd probably add security to your house and do all kinds of things. The city's response, even though they have pulled their request for a hub, the city's response is there are no plans to put a hub at that location at present time. Emphasis on present time. So that makes us all worried as a neighborhood. So the key, the only thing I'm petitioning against the zoning is the emergency care establishment, because that is the gateway to a hub, from my understanding. All the other zoning requests are fine. Mr. Rains needs to make money. All these other things that he's proposing would add to the neighborhood. As you know, we've had a lot of bad experiences. The city put in a homeless shelter in a motel, and it created all kinds of havoc, damage, property loss, etc., or property damage costs. So now, you guys don't, I read through your policies as well. Provincial Policy Statement 2020, page 6. Long-term prosperity, human and environmental health, and social well-being should take precedence over short-term considerations. A hub is a short-term consideration. It's not a solution. Next thing, $2.7 million per hub, times 15 hubs, that's $40 million a year for 2,000 people. 10 years, that's $400 million. And there's healthcare people. She works on a psychiatric hospital. I talked to a child psychologist. The money is better spent on individuals with expertise in dealing with some of these people. The next question, who are the homeless? CTV did a report, 20 to 30% are asylum seekers. I saw the city plan. You don't even meet with the federal immigration. You meet with provincial immigration, but not federal. Where are the MPs? 20 to 30% aren't even Londoners. They're coming from outside the country. So that's my last. So do we live in a democracy, or what do we live in? I see the cities lined up with this global sort of city planning. Do you represent them, or do you represent your taxpayers of the City of London? That's all I want to say.
Thank you. I'm going to just say this to those in attendance. We're here for open discussion. Some you might agree with, some you might disagree with. So I ask that boos or applause not happen. It's just not what I deem as proper for professional discourse here. So thank you very much. I'll look for the next speaker that wishes to address the committee. Please, ma'am, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Hello, my name's Karen Samard. I just want to know, why is City Hall putting their focus on Londoners? Why isn't City Hall putting their focus on Londoners' well-being and safety? Sorry. How does a person put in an application for an empty building to be used for pretty much anything and the city is okay with this? Where's the common sense in this planning application? Why have emergency care establishments and clinics taken off? Or why not? It says the reasoning, because it's on a major road that will have rapid transit in a few years, is not well thought out. We don't know the owner's true intentions, especially with all the new zoning changes. He bought this property just a few months ago to make money and doesn't care about the people and businesses in the neighborhood. Ross Rains said to us we should voice our concerns to the city about the homeless. I want to know why are we being punished for being good citizens? Why is London rewarding bad behavior? I spoke to many neighbors and they feel homeless people have more rights than taxpayers. What about our safety and freedoms? Are you saying to everyone, if you become homeless, we will take care of you? All we ask is to get off the streets. Taxpayers are being forced to pay millions for so few people. Meanwhile, everywhere you look, there are cutbacks. It doesn't make sense. I honestly think London will lose good people with these terrible decisions. City Hall should think about this. If this zoning change is approved, Londoners better get ready because it can happen to any building in London. So I live right beside this property, and we have put a lot of money into our property. We've been good homeowners for 10 years. And for this to happen because, somebody comes in and wants to make a buck off of a building that's been sitting there empty, to me is not right. You need to think about all the old people that are in our neighborhood, all the, the care, the community that's around, like the Dearness Home, the Welcome Center. I just don't think that this is being thought out and that he could, potentially put anything he wants into that building if you guys give him that zoning, like the city's already approved, basically in that letter. So I'm really upset about this. I know my neighbors are really upset about this. It's been stressful for us for the past 2 months. Right before we got this zoning application, my husband had a heart attack. And, it's been nothing but terrible news around my house and in my community. And I really am going to appreciate if you guys can help us and not put this zoning through. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look for the next speaker. Please, sir, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Yes, my name is Ross Rains. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Thank you for the consideration of the rezoning application to include the additional uses for our property at 743 Wellington. As a provider of rental office spaces for businesses, professionals, and nonprofits, we took possession of this property, and it occurred to us that it closely met the profile of a hub according to the hub plan, which we read for the first time last year, which called for an all-community response to the homeless situation in our city. We were moved by the data point that 200 homeless have died since 2020 on our streets. 600 living rough, 129 encampments. We have 2 small hubs right now on hospital lands that are meeting the need of about 5% of the total need. It was in that context that we originally wished to offer, but not push, this site to help address that area's homeless needs, or whatever sector it might best serve. We care about the highest and best use of spaces, and this facility had sat vacant for 4 years, we understand, and had attracted much unwelcome activity in the neighborhood. We're familiar with neighborhoods. Over 15 years ago, we moved into the Soho area, and during that time have brought some 50 businesses into that area. We believe that there's a place for small business to be community builders, but we're only a small part of a big picture. I specifically would like to speak to the one use that's been identified called emergency care establishment. In January, we offered our property in good faith as part of the hub solution needed in our city to help onboard the homeless toward housing first so that wraparound services could rebuild lives and steer them toward supportive and affordable housing as required. And we've heard from neighbors directly at these two public meetings that we hosted on April 9 and 30, and it was a privilege to meet them all and to listen and to learn. And we understand that most do not support the idea of hub use. We heard that for many, the street scene since COVID has been threatening in terms of public safety, property damage, and crime. These are things that we've experienced in neighborhoods where we already operate. And so the notion to many of a hub simply amplifies that rather than helps address it. In addition, we've discovered that a process for onboarding new sites has not yet been defined by the city and wouldn't be until fall 2024, well past the 6 months that we could hold on for a decision to be made. We have two hopes. First, that the needs of the homeless, which are still in crisis, will become a kitchen table conversation across London. And second, that private property owners and businesses will be given clear signals on how to participate in the hub plan. We need leadership to what seems to be a sputtering vision for the homeless. Meanwhile, we ourselves have turned the page on hub use and are pursuing these other uses. We look forward to your consideration of the zoning application to allow a wider range of uses and the opportunity for the vacant building to be occupied in the very near future. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. I'll look for the next speaker. Please, ma'am, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Tracy Gilders. I've lived in this neighborhood for 20-plus years, and I have a husband and I have 2 children. I can see this property directly from my house, so I've seen lots of things in the last 20 years that have progressed in that area. And Ross Rains is correct. We have had a lot of increased theft, crime, due to the housing in Motel 7. So that is a concern of ours. We do know that, in fact, there is a high percentage of increased theft, crime, property damage when you bring a homeless shelter into a neighborhood. So this is why we're all here. I've been a canvasser for this petition and an email contact for the city. So I'm not going to really go over the emails. You know all of the concerns. You've read all the emails. There's lots. My main concern is that I know that the council has the authority to remove the emergency care establishments and clinics from the rezoning submission, and you can approve the rest. So that's really what my request is, and all of ours. The owner has made it very clear that if the city was on board with using this dwelling to support homeless, that this was his sole intention. So that is the concern of the whole neighborhood. Our community, as stated, does not agree with this part of the rezoning. You'll see that in the letters and the emails. I do understand that mental health, addiction, and homelessness is a very big issue in this city, but our community is here today to protect our neighbors and our future homeowners in this area. So we feel quite strongly that having a hub here, I know it's not a discussion for a hub, but the rezoning, definitely if you rezone this as an emergency care and clinics, you can put this in at any time. So that is why we're here. It would further compromise our neighborhood, as always. And we should be allowed to dispute this right now, even though a hub is not on the table, like the owner says. At the second meeting with the neighborhood, the owner made it clear to the council that, to us in that meeting, that the council has the power to strike the rezoning request as he was not able to. So the rezoning of the emergency care and clinic. So you have the power to take that off the table to give our neighborhood security. There, you know, there's a lot of young, old, disabled. There's disabled that live in this neighborhood that walk the streets, picking things up off the ground. You know, an adult disabled person. We have participation houses. You know, you've read the emails. So, you know, we just want to have our faith restored in the city and just remove that. And we would be glad to we would be happy to have Mr. Rains put anything else in there. And, you know, we need to have a better talk. And I see that the city is doing talks with the City of London regarding the homeless. So we need to come together about a plan for that. So, thank you.
Thank you. I'll look for the next speaker.
My name is Tom Shinbein. I live in the area, and my concern is with the process that you have followed. When you read your conditions of a hub, the one word that bugged me the most was the word near. What does it mean to be near a park? What does it need to be near a nursing home? You haven't clearly articulated that, and I think that's critical. Is near 10 meters? Is near 50 meters? You haven't said that. And that's a concern because there is a Windbless Park, which is, in my view, near the location. There is a nursing home called Dearness. I consider that to be near. There is a park that's well used, Westminster Pond. I consider that near. But the policy that you've laid out has not clarified that. So I think in the benefit of an applicant and the benefit of residents, you need to be a little more clear on that point. And as a location, another problem I have is it's right across from one of the main fire halls. The trucks come zipping out of there, and it's not a great place to put a hub with the emergency vehicles flying all over the place. So thank you for your time, but please clarify what it means to be near.
Thank you. And I'll go to the gentleman over there. Please, sir, give us your name. You have 5 minutes.
Ian Skinner. So thank you for your time. There are a lot of concerns that are brought up about the location and how this is going to attract homeless people to things like the ponds, you know, as the one gentleman said, running in front of the fire station. But the reality is that we already have homeless people here. If you've ever done the cleanups along the Westminster Ponds with Antler River Rally, you would see all back in there, there are dozens of tents where people have been living on the rough in what's essentially a bog, a wetland. You know, these are people, regardless of their situation, we need to do something. If it's only emergency care, that is something, that is an improvement. We can't just complain about, you know, things getting worse and worse and how we're going to bring all these homeless people and then ignore the ones that are currently here. They have no supports. Where are they supposed to go? What are they supposed to do? And, you know, there are concerns with increase in crime and, you know, theft, property damages. If we don't put in supports, these things aren't going to get better. Like, yes, maybe we will attract a few more homeless people, but we're going to make a positive impact in the long run with some sort of support to, you know, slowly get these people back into supportive housing, you know, help them get back into normal life.
Thank you. I'll look for the next speaker. Go ahead, ma'am. Please give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. My name is Frances Durand. I don't live in the area. I have grandchildren that live in the area. I love the Westminster Ponds. We have a welcome center there where we welcome people from outside of the city to come. And I dearly love that we're anxious to help the homeless, and I agree with that 100%. However, is this really the right place to even consider an emergency? The number of lanes that to get from the building on Wellington to get across the street to the open area where a lot of the homeless like to be anyway, I could just see an accident. It's an accident waiting to happen. Also, is this how, when people come to our city and they go to the Welcome Center, do they want to look across the street at a bunch of carts and people standing outside? I mean, look at what happened at Adelaide and Queen, for example. The homeless need to be helped, absolutely. I just can't see how this would be a proper location for a place where they would feel comfortable. They want their little space. They don't want a big fancy building. How much money are you going to spend to make that place a proper emergency shelter for the homeless? Could that money not be spent in a better way to actually help them with mental facilities, with smaller places where they can lock up their belongings? I just don't see forgive me, I didn't prepare anything. I'm just speaking off the cuff. And I believe that if you remove the emergency shelter and the gentleman can make money other ways.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't worry about, this is very intimidating to speak to a large number of people and to us. So thank you for your comments, and don't apologize. I'll look for the next speaker.
Well, I guess I have
Yeah, move it to, thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Please give us your name and, whoops.
Okay.
Someone.
Go to the top. Thanks, Ross. Oh, scream? I may, by the time I'm finished. No.
Please go ahead.
My name is Wendy Campbell. My name is Wendy Campbell, and I'm a resident, a long-time resident of Eden Ave. I thought this meeting was regarding an application, not about a hub. Now, am I for a hub?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, we just can't hear the speaker's comments.
Okay, sorry.
No.
I can't get I keep getting you.
How's that?
That's good.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Can you sing?
Just for my dinner. Okay. Anyways, I thought that this was about an application. We've heard lots about hubs, and I think we need to discuss an awful lot about our homeless people. So this is what I've prepared. Since I live within the boundaries for the notification of this particular rezoning application, I received, I read, and I reread the original and the revised applications. I found the First Amendment request of March 26th rather strange, but the second one of April 18th, with the added amendments for proposed or possible uses, this verges on ridiculousness. This building is situated on one of the busiest roads in London, a major artery leading into and out of the city. The volume of traffic is extremely high, and attempting to cross Wellington for a northbound bus is virtually impossible. Walking or cycling on the sidewalk in front of 743 Wellington is also risky because there is no curbing. You're right level with the road. And the existing parking lot for this location to travel north is cause for another potential accident. Now, to all this, add your BRT. In my opinion, the zoning should remain as an R01. This would be the safest for future businesses, any existing businesses, and the surrounding neighborhoods. Now, I've got one last comment to make, and I know a lot of people are going to agree with me. This site is north of Southdale Road. It is not White Oaks.
Thank you. I'll look for the next speaker. Please, sir, give us your name and you have 5 minutes.
Okay. My name is Jeff Goodwin, and I actually lived just outside the exclusion zone. Technically, I'm next door to Wendy Campbell. The short story here. Last September, I had major heart surgery. So I'm now in the program of St. Joe's, which requires me to exercise. Well, I walked by that said building on Wellington Road. And more than once, I've almost been accosted. And according to my cardiologist, if I was accosted, there's a good chance that somebody would be paying for my funeral and my casket. I'm not against anybody helping the homeless if they can find a suitable location, the suitable funds, and where are the funds coming from? I don't see the city coughing up $40 million, because there's a lot of places that could be bought, adapted, and secondly, where are all the people going to be that's going to staff this thing? Like, as I said, I'm in this program at St. Joe's, which includes mental assistance because of what I hadn't done to the inside of me. And I got a nice scar somebody wants to look from my throat down to my waist, from where I was punched open and cut up and fixed. So I'm trying to get somebody to look after me just for my simple, you might say, condition, where we're talking to somebody who's got a long-term mental issue because of their being homeless. And maybe it's not their own fault. And we need to kind of separate the homeless from the drug addicts, and the people just down in their luck. Let's ask the city, where are the jobs for people with minimal education that can be done to make a suitable living? I'm a foreigner. When I came to Canada, I had no education. I've done menial jobs that no Canadian would even do or even think of. So why, it's almost like putting the cart before the horse. If there's no places for people to live, no employment, now you can say, well, we're putting this and we're going to do that in St. Thomas and this and that, but the people that you're hiring are not people like me that has that kind of education or the ability to maybe even do those kind of jobs anymore. So, but anyway, that's all I got to say. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll look for the next speaker.
Okay. No, you go ahead. I'll speak after.
Hello, Councilor.
Please give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
My name's Cindy Williams. I've lived on Creston Ave, which is a block and a half from the site. 46 years I've lived there, and I've never seen our neighborhood so upset. There would be a whole lot more people here today if they thought this wasn't a done deal with the hub. You guys did a great job on your advertising, getting a hold of the paper, the news. You know, everybody thinks it's a done deal, that there will never be a hub there. I don't believe that's... Ross Rains has made it very clear that that was not off the table in the future. He said, we asked him if he would put it in writing, saying that he would never put in a homeless hub there, and he said he would not do that. So how are we to believe him? Since you put in the homeless hubs across the street, we've had more and more homeless people in our neighborhood, and the Super 7 Hotel. You say that you're going to help the homeless. I would say a lot of people that are homeless have trauma issues, and we need to help them. What do? We shut down the hospitals. Within it was about a year before COVID hit, they had an excellent program for trauma at Victoria Hospital there, at Commissioners and Wellington. They shut it down because somebody deemed it not important, that we did not need to deal with trauma people. The other issue that I'm concerned about is these I think it was 2015, London became a sanctuary city. So what happens? They come by the busload from different cities. And if you say that that's not happening, that is absolutely 100% not true. They are coming in by the busloads. My neighbor across the road used to work out in Vancouver. She asked where all these people were going. There was 2 busloads from Vancouver. They were laughing at us. They said, oh, we're sending them to London. It was a joke to Vancouver. Toronto's doing the same thing. They were sending them to Hamilton. I don't know if they were sending them here. But this is an issue. This is a ball that has been rolling, and we're on that treadmill, and I don't know where it's going to stop. My husband works downstairs. He has a business downtown. His business, the homeless are everywhere around his place. He's constantly picking up clothes, garbage. He cannot put his garbage out the day before. He has to go before 7 o'clock to work to put his garbage out because they go through the garbage. Now, he has set it up so that if there's any scrap metal or boxes that they could use, big boxes, he puts those out the night before so they could take it away. But if he puts his garbage out, they root through the garbage. The 2 homeless hubs that you put in is riddled with garbage. I have another friend that lives downtown in one of the condos. They have a common area for that building so that they could, enjoy their expensive condos. They can't use it. They had to board it up because the homeless were taking it over and just trashing it. I don't know how we solve this problem where we have to be responsible for taking care of our property. We can be fined if we don't take care of our property. If we've got garbage,
30 seconds.
they don't get fined. There's no consequences for any of their actions, and there's no big support. Where's the big hospitals to help those that really need the help? Thank you.
Thank you. Look for the next speaker. Please, ma'am, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
My name is Anne Maria Velastro. I wasn't going to speak to this issue today, but I just wanted to let everyone here know that our neighborhood too, which is near the Thames River, has encampments and tents on both sides of the shoreline, up and down the shoreline. We have the same issues. I've woken up in the morning and had people sitting in my backyard. We don't tie up our garbage anymore because they get ripped open, so we just leave them open for people to easily rummage through them. So it's not a unique problem to your neighborhood. It's really a citywide problem. But in my neighborhood, we have not-for-profit housing. We have London Housing Corporation. We have brain injury supportive housing. And I would be very welcoming to have a new housing project in my neighborhood that would be very supportive of people, if we could get them off the shoreline of the Thames River and into an area where they get supportive housing. So I think that's the difference between what you're describing in the hotels. And so this proposal, if it goes forward or if it's allowed, I think it'll make it better for your neighborhood. I know that in my neighborhood, when we've had supportive housing for people with no housing, it's better. Right now, people that go through the garbage, they're hungry. They're looking for something like towels. They're looking for something to make their own place better. Like I've locked everything down. I don't even leave a chair out anymore because I'm worried my chair is going to be taken. So I would like those sort of needs to be addressed. And I think that our neighborhood would welcome a supportive housing. We already have lots of supportive housing in my neighborhood. It works well. So I don't think there's anything to be afraid of. I think that this might just make your neighborhood better, and it's not like what's at the motels. And if the motels aren't kept up, you can file a property complaint, and the city will go down there and ask them to clean it up. They need a complaint first to get that process going. So that's all my comments are really addressed to my fellow Londoners here today. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look for the next speaker. Please, ma'am, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Hi there, my name is Jacqueline Durand, and I live on Creston Avenue. I think the proposal for a homeless hub at the location on Wellington Road, the issue is the building is tiny. It's a temporary solution. It's a Band-Aid solution to the homeless issue in London, and the city needs to do something bigger and better to help the homeless people instead of giving them a temporary place to stay. I'm a personal support worker, and I work out in the community, and I see all sorts of different situations. I look after somebody who is a drug user, and they get free drugs to try and help them stop doing fentanyl, but they take the free drugs, they resell them on the street, and they're still doing fentanyl. So the city is trying to help somebody, but they're actually not really helping. It's just a Band-Aid solution. So I think putting a temporary housing hub on a busy city street is not going to be helping the homeless. It is just a temporary Band-Aid solution to a much bigger problem. And there are other issues in the city that we could be funding and addressing as well, such as people needing palliative care, people needing home care, people on wait lists for 10 years to get into long-term care that have nowhere to go because there are no beds, people getting kicked out of Parkwood Hospital who are not rehabilitated to be in their own home yet but have no choice because there's no space left for them. There are just so many issues in the city that I think need to be addressed in a bigger picture as opposed to doing a Band-Aid solution for something that isn't really going to help anybody in the long term.
Thank you. I'll look for the next speaker. Please, sir, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's Mike Wallace, and I'm going to be here on behalf of LDI on this particular. I wasn't planning on speaking to this, but I want to make sure that council understands what the realities of the situation is. So LDI, part of our service as a development community, we have offered to those who are interested in sites, whether they're service providers, those who actually help the homeless, or those who have a site that they're interested in. We've, at our own cost, have gone by and done a review with our real estate people to see if that meets the zoning criteria, a number of issues, the applicability of a building, whether it's easily converted to either hub or deeply assisted housing. And as you know, one group of ours have bought a closed nursing home and turning it into a deeply assisted housing project, which is moving forward nicely. I just want to give you a bit of reality. Look, as part of the vision was up to 15 hubs. That's not ever going to happen. I think we're, in realistic terms, we're hoping that the city can get to 5. We have 2 that are open currently, 2 so far after a year and a half. And so our reality is that when we talk to landowners, owners of actual properties, it's been very difficult to find those who are interested in, oh, it's not me, providing their site for the ability to either host a hub or assisted housing. That's my phone. I'm sorry, I didn't know I had it over there. But anyways, so anyway, when you're looking at the application today, I just want to let you know, it's rare for us to come across landowners that are interested in having the ability to have a hub on their site. And it's a challenge. And as part of the vision that the city has been supporting in the whole community response is that we're looking at, we get people off the street into a hub, try to stabilize them so that they're able to move to deeply assisted housing, and then from there to regular housing. It is a process. There's no skipping. There's no skipping the parts. You need this transitional ability. So when you're looking at applications coming forward that have that opportunity to provide that emergency care coverage, I would, speaking on behalf of the group, we would like to see that happen and that council support that. Whether that ever becomes a hub or not, But that zoning ability is a challenge if we don't have it in a number of spots, because those who have the ability to provide the space, they're not coming to the table as quickly as we thought that might happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Look for the next speaker. Please, sir, give us your name. You have 5 minutes.
My name is Daryl Stacy, and I live on Eden Ave. I've been there probably 40 years now. I've seen a lot of transition over that period of time. And Mr. Wallace is definitely right in terms of the fact that, yes, we need assistance for our homeless folks. We need the support help. I think InWell is probably one of the best programs we've had in the city, and for those people that are in those programs. But they're getting the support. When you get somebody who has addiction problems, has homeless problems, has mental health problems, the triple whammy, I understand that. It's a very complex issue, and I'm totally with the folks that are saying, yes, we have to do something about that. Now, Mr. Rains, being a businessman, bought that property in December for $2.4 million. He's waited 4 months, and he hasn't been able to rent it. So I understand his frustration, saying, geez, I've invested all this money. Maybe I could, homelessness. That's a very poignant issue in this city. And if I can tie my horse to that cart, then perhaps
Just hold on a second. Sir, just interrupt. We have a point of order.
Thank you. Chair, I think it would be helpful to remind those in the gallery that this is not a personal attack on an individual for whatever purpose they may have put forward the application. I think that it's important that we be respectful of everybody that is speaking today.
Well, I'm actually supporting
Just hold on a
Mr.
second, sir, please. Go, please finish, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. My request is that we remind the gallery that this discussion is not personal. It's about an application, and it's not about personal intentions nor profiteering. I think it's important that we have that discussion at this point.
Yeah, I tend to agree with the councillor. To attribute motivation to someone taking whatever action is not the forum for that.
Well,
you can
Ed?
speak, sir. You can speak to the issue at hand, which is the rezoning, and strictly leave it to that. So if you would please keep your comments to that.
Okay, so the rezoning issue is that there was an add-on, and of course, there was a firm hired by the applicant in order to make this process happen. And I totally get that, and I understand that the company, that's their purpose. They're acting on behalf. And what Mr. Wallace was talking about is that he's glad that Mr. Rains is available. But I'm saying for that particular building, in that particular area, it's just not suitable. The traffic issues, the safety issues, the crossing of if you've been in anywhere like Dundas and Lyle or down near Salvation Army Place, you know that people will be out and about. It may not happen in January and February, but it's definitely going to happen in the summertime. And these folks, that's just what they do. It's not against anything that what's happened. Now, the people that live closer to that site than I do have had more experiences. I mean, I see folks up and down the street, but nothing of what they have to deal with. So yes, we have to do something about this issue. The city has to step up in other ways, and it's just not a good fit for the neighborhood. And it won't be a good fit for those folks that if this happens. So let's just deal with the zoning. There's all kinds of reasons that the existing owner can still rent his property using the existing zoning bylaws. Just remove the emergency clinic part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look for the next speaker. Please, ma'am, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Yes, so my name is Nicole Watt, and I live on Eden Ave as well. I didn't plan on speaking today either. So we lived on the street now for just 20 years, so we're one of the newer residents on the street. So our child has grown up on the street, our child has gone to school on the street. New residents on the street and rental houses have been converted to rental units, which is perfectly fine. We have more people coming in the neighborhood, more young children. Our street actually over the last 5 years has gotten a lot of young children on the street. They play together, they go up and down the streets together. My daughter, I don't even like her walking down Wellington Road near our house and by BX 93, I'll call it that. Tim Hortons by herself. There's a lot of people up and down that street. There's a very range of population of people. It's not necessarily safe. When I think about helping out homeless, I actually work at the Parkwood Mental Health Care Building, and I work for psychiatry. I don't work with patients myself, but I do see it firsthand. I actually have family, friends who have also dealt with homelessness, mental health, addiction. I'm fully aware of the issues that we're having in the city, and it's horrible. Anyone who comes to the city can see it. My concern with the building and the land use, the application for what you want, I see Salvation Army down here on, Wellington and Horton, thank you. So it's supposed to be an area to help out the homeless and people in need, which I'm sure it does. It also has a ton of people who are camping outside, they're going to different areas around the neighborhood, they're walking out in front of vehicles, they're stopping people, they're harassing people. I don't want this for my child. I don't want it for the children around my neighborhood. I don't want it for myself. My fear is that this establishment, yes, it might be originally caused for, people want to do good, and I'm glad people do. This is a gateway on a major intersection of our city. I'm afraid, and this is my fear, that this is going to turn into a drug hub. Drug deals are going to be able to be done at this location super easily. It's going to be on the BRT. There is going to be drugs. There's already prostitution in the neighborhood. And it's not a good fit for this neighborhood. I totally agree with that. Do I think we need to do something in the city for homelessness? Absolutely. Absolutely. I see it all the time. Like I said, we all have. But we also don't want to feel like prisoners in our homes. We don't want to feel like we have to lock up our belongings. My husband, he goes for bike rides downtown. He sees people defecating at the front of people's doorsteps. I don't want that at my house. I don't want it in my neighborhood. I don't want to have to worry about needles or human excrement in my neighborhood. I don't want this. And this is my fear. If this turns into this kind of establishment, it might have the intent to be good, but is it going to stay good? Is it going to cause more issues? Is it going to, after years of use, slowly get forgotten? Or is the care going to go downhill? This is a real concern for our neighborhood. We see it, we can see the building from our homes, we can see the people walking back and forth, and we can see what potentially could happen. And this is our fear as homeowners. We don't live in $1 million homes. We don't want our property value to also go down. We don't want to have to move. People have moved to this area on purpose because it is a nice, quiet street. It's close to the ponds, it's close to Wellington Road, it's close to the mall. It's a good location. What happens to us homeowners who have spent our hard-earned money on what we can afford, and our property values now go down? What are we going to have to do then when we say we have to sell our home? Are we now having to lose equity in our home because of what's happened in the neighborhood? And I don't think that's fair to people who enjoy their homes, enjoy their property, take care of their property, have pride in it. You go down our street, you go down all 3 streets around our neighborhood, people pride themselves on the property. It is a beautiful little place to live, and we want to keep it that way.
Thank you. I'll look for the next speaker. I'll ask the clerk if there's anyone online. Okay, I don't see anyone rushing up to the mic in the gallery. So I'll look for a motion to close the public participation meeting. Councillor Rahman, seconded by Councillor Frank. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you. I will put the item 3.3 on the floor for committee. Looking for motions or comments. Councillor Rahman.
Thank you, and through you, I have some questions, but not ready to put a motion forward. Is that okay?
Yep, please go ahead.
My question actually is for staff, and it relates to the zoning bylaw, Section 2, specific to the emergency care establishment designation. So one of the things I'm struggling with as we're looking at our hubs implementation, and have brought this up before, but also when it pertains to our zoning, is the use of a term like emergency care establishment, which can have dual uses, and specifically around the language around generally less than 6 weeks for the majority of the residents. So I'm just wondering if, with our Rethink Zoning process, if there is a plan to reevaluate some of the terminology here associated with emergency care establishments, and whether or not, and this is kind of specific, but whether or not we are specifically looking at some terminology that would be reflective of the type of establishment we're looking to zone for a hub in the future.
I'll go staff.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. It will be a consideration as part of the Rethink Zoning, but that's a separate review process that would look at definitions in general, all the definitions of the current zoning bylaw, including this one, and making those refinements, taking feedback, but that's a separate public process.
Councillor.
Thank you. And through you, so when we're currently approving locations potentially, and again, I hear we're looking at this the fall of 2024, for potential hubs in the future, with the emergency care establishment zone as part of that designation, would we ultimately be in contradiction of our own zoning because we are looking at establishments that have, or we're actually aware that we're going to be using the facility for more than 6 weeks?
I'll go with staff.
Through the chair, just so that I'm understanding the question clearly, the review would be also looking at locational criteria in terms of where the location of emergency care facilities, establishments would be suitable. Usually it's on high order streets, access to transit and things like that, and relative to needs in terms of recreation, parks, things like that as well.
Councillor.
Thank you. To follow up. So my understanding is that within the hubs model, and I'll reference the hub that we were looking at at 705 Fanshawe Park Road. Within that location, we were told that those residing there could be residing there for up to 2 years. But within the emergency care establishment zoning, it says that the zoning is for providing a means of immediate temporary accommodation and assistance for a short-term period, generally less than 6 weeks for the majority of the residents. So what I'm asking is that do we need to provide direction for a specific zoning designation for a hub so that we're not in contravention of our own zoning when it comes to emergency care establishment? My concern is that this actual designation is actually for providing emergency care services. And what we're doing is, by having these overlapping definitions, what we're doing is we may actually be creating a challenge for ourselves in the future with getting establishments pre-zoned for this particular use because of this exact conversation, which means medical clinics, which means places that would have provided short-term care may not want to apply for this designation, or may see that there is challenges because the designation is now considered similar to that of a hub. I just think that we can provide clarity for the community by having a separate zoning designation that is clear and transparent for people to understand. And if we're going this direction, it makes sense to me that we have that as a separate designation and that we put that in the work plan for the fall of 2024 so that these residents don't have to come back and be concerned that the zoning is the same as a hub, because it wouldn't be at that time, because a new zoning terminology would be in place for our hub conversation for fall 2024.
I'll go staff.
Through the chair, we're happy to take whatever direction that committee and council decides on this matter. I will just point to that we have done an assessment and the hubs do meet this definition for this type. If you were to come up with a specific type, that then would limit any properties in the city that are currently have that zoning to be able to allow for it, for a hub. So that would very much limit the opportunities for hubs in the short term until there is that rethink process is complete. But it would be up to having direction from committee and council to be able to look at having a specific definition or requesting us to prepare that for you.
Councillor?
Thank you. I appreciate the feedback and that answer, and we'll look to seek further information on that direction. But I'll return now to the conversation at hand on this specific location, and I'll reserve any additional time till I hear from the ward councillor. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go to committee. Okay, Councillor Hillier.
Thank you very much. A lot of conversation regarding this area, and I'm very glad a lot of the residents showed up. I have 2 of these across the road, and as the residents know, the density, that seems to be a bit. I feel our area has done its part. Now, I would like to make a small amendment, if this is the correct time, to change the restricted office special provision zone to just eliminate emergency care establishments to alleviate the neighborhood's concerns. I don't know if I have a seconder for that, but I would like one.
So Councillor Hillier, I believe you can make a motion to accept the staff recommendation, but amending it by removing
The emergency care establishments, yes.
Correct. Okay. So that's the motion that is on the floor. I'll look for a seconder for that motion. Councillor Lewis, or Deputy Mayor Lewis has seconded that motion. So we have a motion moved and seconded, and I'll open the floor for conversation. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, I'm willing to second this. I think it's important we have this discussion because I actually share some of Councillor Rahman's concerns. I'm not actually convinced that our current zoning bylaw with the 6-week reference in there is actually met by the hubs. And one of the reasons I am not confident that it is consistent with the hubs is that we still have a challenge in terms of flow through. Once somebody is stabilized in a hub, we still have a lack of housing inventory available for them to transition from the hub into housing. And so we can't say that it's going to be just 6 weeks. It might be 90 days, it might be 120 days, it might be 180 days. At this time, we're really, I think, putting ourselves in some really gray areas in terms of saying the 6-week covers it. So I think maybe perhaps we do need to revisit whether a particular definition is needed for a facility like that. I will say, because it's the amendment is only the emergency care facility, I'm more supportive of that. I heard some comments from the gallery about clinics. I would not want to remove the opportunity for a medical walk-in clinic to open in this space. In fact, I know that there is a physician recruiter who has at least looked at the property. Whether it's suitable or not for a medical clinic, I don't know, but that's up to them to decide, but I wouldn't want to take that opportunity away. And I want to say, I want to take this opportunity to say, I understand the community's concerns about the proximity, and Councillor Hillier referenced it. When we endorsed the whole of community response, part of the founding or underlying principle for me was that it was a whole of community and that services were going to be spread out and not concentrated in one particular neighborhood or another. This location is 600 meters away, give or take a few meters. The aerial mapping on the website is always subject to a little bit of error, but approximately 600 meters away from a hub that is open and operating. To me, that is in close proximity. to an existing facility. That is not what I would consider a reasonable distance to spread them out from. I also hear what Mike Wallace from the LDI was commenting. It's hard to find these locations. It absolutely is. I would agree as well that 15, that number is never going to happen. If we reach 5, I think we will have really stood up a system that can address some of the concerns. And we do need places that are temporary in nature for an individual. And that comes back to my concern about the zoning, is folks do need to be stabilized before they can succeed in housing. That's, you know, we can talk about long-term solutions being needed, and I really do want to take this opportunity to invite those who spoke today, those who've written in, because I do empathize with their concerns. But I really want to invite you to also take the time to dive deeper into the whole of community response and the Hubs plan and learn a little bit more. And even if that's all you do, that's great. If it inspires you to donate or volunteer or be more active in some way to help out, that's great too. But even if it's just learning a little bit more about how critical it is when somebody has been living rough to get them stabilized first, because they don't succeed in housing later if we don't support them, if we don't put those transitional pieces in place too. So I know I'm running out of time. I will say, Mr. Chair, that the change in policy that we made with the tenant placement agreements with London Middlesex Community Housing, we're still in the early days there, but that right there has shown why we need things like Hubs first, because until people are stabilized, they don't succeed in even the limited housing that is available. So we do need some more of them, but I'm not convinced that on Wellington Road, 600 meters away from another location, is the best place for one. I am open to being persuaded by my colleagues, but I am willing to support the amendment because I'm not sure that the zoning even actually covers the Hubs, and I think we've actually put ourselves in a gray area with this 6-week definition.
Any other comments? Councillor Pelosi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for recognizing me as a guest at your committee to speak to this application, as I am the ward councillor for this area. I want to start off by thanking staff for the report and the information they've provided for the community and their work with the applicant. Thank you to Ms. Hall. I don't just want to indicate residents, this is the individual who you've been writing, who kept track of all your correspondence and provided information and made sure that you were in the package today, as there was certainly lots that you can see in your package. And I want to thank Mr. Rains. I do believe he came forward in good faith, hearing a call to action and believing that he could be of service to the community and responding to council's plan and when he purchased the property. So I want to thank him for that. As we also heard from Mr. Wallace, that it is not many who are stepping forward. I think how we handle this process will set the stage of potential partners coming forward or not, realizing if we're actually willing to put effort and actions towards. I've also heard that Mr. Rains has been a good property owner so far, so thank you again for that from the community, making sure that lighting at this location is actually up, that the property is maintained as it was not prior, and they were having definite safety issues. I will comment that, as you've heard, there was a Super 7 motel in the area that was part of our cold weather response. There was some community issues, I would say substantial community issues that I've learned of. So thank you to the community for making me aware of those issues, and you know how to find me now if I can be of assistance. And staff have confirmed that there was one family with children left in that motel who'd since moved out in April. So anyone in the area now is not part of that hotel and lodging. As you've heard, there was some support for a hub. A lot of community concerns come from what it would look like. Is there safety concerns? Who would actually be the residents here? And we don't have those answers because as staff have confirmed, there's no funding in place, there's no operator in place, and there's no hub plan at this location, as that's a separate process come the fall, whatever staff report may look like. Also thanking residents for mobilizing and making each other aware of the application as the city follows their standard application process of only notifying residents within so many meters of the application site, which was followed. So word of mouth in the community meetings are for part of it. And thank you to the applicant as well for hosting 2 community meetings before this meeting today, one of which I was at. Residents have actually also written recently in today's report. Appendix A is the bylaw attached. The date's on it's June 4th. Some were concerned that this is already a decision of committee, so just for the public, any draft bylaws attached with any planning application report. So this is the conversation today, and that will be amended as needed. It is not a done decision, just a draft bylaw comes with every decision. For those interested, as Deputy Mayor Lewis had mentioned, the next HOLA system response to homelessness is actually going to be a community meeting held on May 23rd at the East Lyons Community Center. Please come out. As you've heard, it does need to be a whole system community response. I will note I'm also on the Dearness Home Long-Term Care Board and on Tourism London. Both agencies are aware of this application, as a vacant building in any neighborhood creates unwanted issues on its own. So we would love to see somebody in there. As you've heard, the hub application would be separate from this. Just we've gotten to the issue that if the care establishment is in there, at that point, it's a council decision and conversation. So that's why residents are here today. As for the application itself, I'm supportive of it. Would love to see a tenant in there to help with any vagrancy issues in the property, as more eyes on the street help with all issues. If there's any direct questions, I'm sure our guests in the gallery would be happy to answer them. I'm supportive of staff's recommendation. I would flag my concern for the removal of the emergency care establishment. Mr. Rains, I know it's a business and he can only hold a property for so long, and our timelines that we run off of the city and us not having that package ready to go would mean he needs to find another suitable candidate as soon as possible to take over tenancy. My concern is if we remove the emergency care establishment, that as a council, we'd be sending a signal to the community at large, to business partners, to those serving on the whole system community response, that we don't believe in our own plan and we're undermining it at this point in this decision factor, and potentially seeing other applications for the Planning and Environment Committee that come forward that people would want this provision are automatically not in there, or as soon as they see it, removed. I'm not sure if Mr. Rains has a potential tenant that needs this zoning, or there could be somebody out there who would, in which case he would have to come back again to get it. So those are my concerns. I don't serve on the committee. I can't vote on this, but it's been a process as we go through this together as a community. So thank you for everyone for coming, and your correspondence, always available to answer questions offline once we leave this room as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Other comments or questions from committee members or visiting councillors? Councillor Pribble.
I'll give a little bit of my feedback, even though I'm not a member of this committee, and I do hear the concern of the residents, because it does say, you know, short-term accommodation, generally less than 6 weeks. So generally, it opens up the window that it's not a must that it's in a period of less than 6 weeks. Yes, what I heard, we all know, to find a location within our city for hubs and these facilities is going to be very challenging, because again, no one is going to be jumping up and down. I would love this establishment to be outside my door. Having said that, looking at from the perspective of the business, it is truly a gateway to our city. If we have any citywide convention, anything happening, big events downtown, Budweiser Gardens, we already have it on Wellington at Horton, as one of the residents already mentioned. I certainly don't feel that this would be in big picture on the economic side for our city. This would be a good location for us to have a hub. And I just want to give you my feedback in terms of this location. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tressel.
Isn't one of the thank you for having me. I'm also a guest here, not a member of the committee. And I'd like to address this to the chair. Isn't one of the criteria for such hubs in the first place that it be along an established transit route?
I'll go to staff on that.
Thank you for the question. Through the chair to Councillor Trouble. One of the criteria of the hub's implementation plan is that it should be along or near transit routes. However, there will be a two-stage process for determining where the location of the hubs will be. So the first stage is identifying and shortlisting potential lead agencies and properties that would fit what is proposed in the hub implementation plan. And then the second stage would be establishing the capital and operational costs, and both of those will go to council for endorsement.
Councillor.
Thank you, that's what I thought.
Okay, thank you. Other comments, or Councillor Frank?
Thank you. Yes, just listening to colleagues, listening to residents, and trying to factor in all these thoughts as people are sharing information. In my perspective, it seems as if the applicant, who I tremendously applaud your leadership in this area. Again, we don't have a lot of people stepping forward who are willing to invest money into creating shelters and creating hubs. So I really appreciate you showing leadership in this area. And I'm sure it has been somewhat difficult, but again, appreciate it nonetheless. But what I have heard is that there's no current intention for a hub location. If there were to be a hub location, there would be further dialogue, discussion, making sure it checks all the boxes, and it would come back to council for permission and for funding. So I really think at this point, we are talking about something that's not even in front of us. And I think that we should be focusing on the fact that there's an applicant here who has spent $15,000 on an application, and as well as money investing in consultants and studies, and is interested in seeking alternative uses to make his investment more financially viable. I know everyone on this council is really concerned with making sure that businesses are able to move forward in whatever means they need to achieve their goals in this community, and we are really concerned about economic value here. So one of the things that I think is maybe I'm finding frustrating is, yes, we talked about how we don't want the hubs all congregated together. These hubs are still significantly separated. There's a major arterial road that's actually crossing all three. All three are in three separate areas with major arterial roads. I have received, and I'm not the ward councillors for the area, but I have received no complaints about the unsightliness of the hubs that are currently existing. If anything, all I've heard is very appreciative commentary about those. And to one of the residents of the gallery who mentioned the fact that there are people sleeping outside in tents in Westminster Ponds. The whole point of the hubs is to try and get people to not be sleeping outside in tents. And so the very thing we're complaining about is the very thing this thing is supposed to solve, if it was even to be a hub, which again, as we've heard, is not even the case here. So I'm not going to be supporting the amendment because we clearly have an application here where the applicant is looking for a variety of different uses on the site in order to make it a viable property. It is currently vacant, which is much worse for the neighborhood than actually having something operating out of the building. And I agree with Councillor Pelosa. I do worry about the message this sends to the broader community about our commitment to our plan. So I will be not supporting the amendment because it has removed the emergency care services, and I understand that from residents that probably is very frustrating. And again, I listened to you and I appreciated the comments that you had. I have a different opinion, and that sometimes happens at council, but I will not be supporting this amendment with the removal of emergency care services in the case that the applicant is able to find a suitable tenant that maybe needs that purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go any further, the clerk has advised me that there's some housekeeping that needs to be done to the motion. And I'll go to the mover and the seconder. I'm just going to read out the suggested wording. Section 34, bracket 17 of the Planning Act, no further notice be given, just to make things proper. So I'll look to the Councillor Hillier. Are you okay with adding that wording? He's okay, and Deputy Mayor, you okay as a seconder? Okay. So I just wanted to get that taken care of before I go on to further councillors that want to speak to this. Okay, seeing none, I'd like the Deputy Mayor, Vice Chair to take the chair for me so I can comment.
Thank you. I will take the chair and recognize Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. You know, we've touched on a very complex question of the day, and how do we deal as a city with what's being experienced across Canada with homelessness driven by addiction and mental health. The hub system, while not perfect, was an attempt by the city to address this in a very unique way, and I was supportive because it provided the medical supports that, while not in a hospital or rehab center, was that step up to above and beyond just a shelter. And I think I heard some comments today that where it's comparing a hub to a shelter, and they're very different. The hub system is a longer-term stay with proper medical supports to transition folks into a more of a stable housing unit, such as Inwell, as the Deputy Mayor alluded to. That being said, part of the process, I always felt that location was a key factor, and each location presented to us would have to be looked at on the merits, in my opinion, of who is going to be operating, who is going to stay there, and how is that operation going to look. I think a concern was raised today about the actual zoning, which states that's up to 6 weeks, and anything longer than that really doesn't apply, and it's a bit of a murky field. And I do agree with the comments that were made by members of the committee that we need to, I'd like to see a more specific zoning specifically for hubs. And I think that request for that zoning change, if it's needed, should be part and parcel of a whole hub application that would come to, whether it's this committee or SPPC or council, I don't know. Because I need to see who the operators are. So in this particular case, while this is not a hub request, there is a back door that has been, I think, feared by members of the community, and I can see some justification in that. So it has turned into essentially a hub application, but it's not. But being that we're there anyway, I have trouble with it because I don't know who, if it did turn into a hub, but somewhere down the road, I don't know who the operators are. And I understand that there would be further, you know, council involvement in that, but I don't want this to be used as a backdoor into that. I understand what Councillor Frank is saying, you know, either we're on this board with the hub system or not, and the idea is to spread help across the city and not in one location. I'm still on board with that, but with that caveat that it has to be in the right location. Now, that being said, Mr. Wallace does raise some realistic attributes to this plan, is that we're finding it hard to find suitable locations. We can see that today. And quite frankly, I think we're finding it hard to find suitable operators or operators with the expertise that's needed, required by the hub plan stepping forward. So, you know, you have to find the right operator, the right location, and then funding that was raised today. We have funding, I think, for a few more, but we're going to need, quite frankly, a province to step in at some point if we're going to go the distance with the 13. So for those reasons, I will support the amended motion. And other further rezoning that comes here, I think we have to look very carefully at getting some clear wording in our zoning before those applications are brought to this committee. So thank you, Vice Chair, for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Lehman. I'm going to return the chair to you. I'm going to note that you've got Councillor Rahman on the speakers list, and then if you'll return to me, I have one additional question for staff.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Rahman.
Thank you, and through you, and thanks for those comments. I just want to return to our conversation around the emergency care zoning, and I'm wondering if, through the chair, the applicant might be able to comment on what other potential intended uses under the emergency care establishment zoning he may be looking to promote or introduce within that space, if he has any
If the
potential
applicant would
conversations or
care to
any-
respond to the councillor's inquiry.
Thank you, Councilor Rahman. Through you, Mr. Chair. Right now, as we noted, there is no active pursuit of anybody within that emergency care establishment definition. Mr. Rains is actively looking at other tenants that would fit the other uses that we've asked for. So no, to simply answer your question, no, there's no one right now that's been identified as a potential user.
Thank you, councillor.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, to staff, I'm wondering whether or not staff can give any indication of different establishments that currently use that designation?
I'll go to council, or go to staff.
Thank you, through the chair, to Councilor Rahman. The emergency care establishments is a zone that is permitted in many zones, so business, district, commercial, arterial, commercial facility, and some residential. In terms of actual facilities, I don't have a list of where they are, but I will say that across the street at the London Tourism Center, that is actually a permitted use, a tourism one across the street.
Councillor.
Thank you. Sorry, I'll be more clear. Could you give examples of where we may have used an emergency care establishment zoning for what the establishments are? Because my understanding, I'll give you an example, is that if somebody was having outpatient day surgery for eye care, that could fall within the emergency care establishment permitted use because they may have an overnight stay or temporary stay at an establishment where they're getting some outpatient service. Can you give me examples?
I'll go to staff.
Through the chair, just to be fair to the staff that are here, the folks that are here aren't the ones that interpret the bylaw, and they would be the ones that would be probably the best to answer that. What we can do is prepare a list of some of those other businesses that have been used this use in the past and provide that to you before council.
Councillor.
Thank you. Follow up. So thank you. I appreciate that in preparation for council. That would be helpful. I just want to gather as well, if, let's say, next week, the applicant finds himself approached by one of those potential examples for a potential application or use of that sort on that property, what's the process for the applicant to then come back to committee?
I'll go to staff.
Through the chair, just to confirm, your question was if they are not permitted their emergency care establishment through this rezoning, what would be the process? And that would be that they would have to come in for a rezoning again to add the use.
Councillor.
Okay, thank you. So this isn't something likely to face an appeal or anything of that sort because it's simply that they could just come back in for a rezoning.
Go to staff.
Through the chair, this application, whatever direction the committee and council go, is subject to appeal, as would another application with the emergency care establishment adding that use is also subject to appeal. They're both subject to a public process.
Councillor.
Thank you. Sorry, I should have been more clear. I was looking to find out if the appeal mechanism or the rezoning both are equally attributable to the application. That's great to understand that. Yeah, because my concern is removing the emergency care establishment is a limitation to the owner in terms of the types of use that might be proposed at the location. However, I also want to give the community some assurances around what direction this committee is taking at this time. So I'm struggling with that from that perspective. So I'm trying to find the avenue that makes the most sense to allow the business owner to operate in that realm and attract the types of businesses that may be desirable in that space, but also to give the residents some more clarity and transparency around the next steps in the process.
Before I go to Deputy Mayor, I just want to further clarify a question. When we when we rezone something, it's not based on the actual business that's going in there. So, for example, I could say I'm having an emergency walk-in clinic, and we rezone it, and then they change their minds, and that tenant doesn't move in. The zoning doesn't go with that specific tenant, so to speak. It's rezoning for whatever tenant would choose to use it.
Yes, that's correct, Chair. Once the zone is established, it stays with the land until there's another change to add other uses or to remove the use.
Right, thank you. Okay, I'll go to the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, my follow-up question was very much in alignment with what you and Councillor Rahman had asked around appeals. And I think, that we've heard from the applicant that they are pursuing potential tenants who would not require the emergency care establishment, and that the timelines here, given that the city doesn't actually have an active RFP out for another hub site at the moment, and while we do have capital dollars, we do not at the moment have provincial operating dollars. It seems clear to me that there's at least some chance of a public appeal if the zoning were to go ahead with the emergency care establishment. If that was the case, the property owner would also be restricted during the appeal period. They would not be able to fill the space with any of the tenants potentially that they're seeking other permitted uses for here at the same time. Is that correct? So that would hold up tenants in other categories that this rezoning would apply?
Go to staff.
Through the chair, you're correct, Councillor Lewis, that additional uses they're seeking would not be permitted until a decision was made by the board.
Deputy Mayor.
And what are our approximate timelines through you, Chair, right now for an appeal hearing at the OLT?
Go to staff.
Through you to the chair, or through the chair to you, Deputy Mayor, a fully litigated hearing likely wouldn't conclude for at least 1.5 to 2 years. Resolution would occur potentially earlier, but to go through the entire process could be up to 2 years.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. That's helpful because I think it's also a concern about the property owner wanting to fill a vacant building. And if we make a decision that lands in an appeal process right now, they can only have the permitted uses. But what I've heard, and this will be my final question, but I believe it was answered when Councillor Rahman asked it, is that nothing in a decision today in terms of a motion that's on the floor currently, an amended version of the staff recommendation, nothing would preclude the property owner from coming back in the future for another rezoning to add another permitted use, whether that's an emergency care establishment or any other use that might be, that they might seek for this land. Is that correct?
I'll go to staff.
Through the chair, that's correct. They can come back with the same application in the future.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So again, that's helpful for me because I want the property owner to be able to fill this space. And if they've got a medical walk-in clinic or something like that, that might be able to move in 30 days or 60 days, I don't want that held up over whether or not at some point in the future, undetermined, because we have no RFP, we have no operating dollar funding source yet, that there might be a future hub there. So I'm going to support the amendment so that the property owner can move forward with other potential tenants. But I do think that it's really clear, or really important to be clear with the public that that doesn't preclude the owner coming back in the future and seeking to change the use again. But what it would do today is allow them to move forward and seek potential other tenants, well, June 4th after council approves it, not today, but it would not preclude them from seeking other tenants on other under uses that are available today. So it's that process of clearing the lane so that this property owner can find a tenant, whatever use that might be, is why I'm going to be supporting this.
Okay. Councillor Rahman, did you have your hand up?
Thank you. Yeah, just to clarify, something that Mr. Wallace had said is that there's currently discussion, I'll call it almost pre-approval, not a pre-approval, let's say consultation, where those that are interested are going out to look at potential properties and have these conversations. But within our original criteria, we said that the first 3 to 5 had to be within emergency care establishment zones already pre-zoned. But then when the first 3 came in and one was not in an emergency care zone, it would have had to have gone through the rezoning process. So again, I'm just clarifying from a zoning perspective, I'm still stuck on whether or not this is the right way to go in terms of zoning, because I think it leaves this gray area, and I would really like to see what those uses are that we may be also having to consider that how this impacts at this point, because I don't want, it to set, especially as we have, medical recruiters and people that are looking to set up MRIs, for instance, that I know of right now. And they're having these kinds of discussions, and I worry that we're getting confused over what this zoning means. So more definition would be helpful, but I just want to understand that that's the criteria right now, that it's conditional on for the fall discussion, is that emergency care establishment zoning.
I'll go, staff.
Thank you. Through the chair, I 100% don't know the answer to the first question in terms of the zoning for these emergency care facilities. Ideally, to allow the 5 to come on sooner, that would be the path to look at pre-zoned lands. That would already allow for it. But we can certainly have that information for you before council as well. And then I'll pass it off to Scott.
Through the chair. So one of the things that help define emergency care establishments as being a bit different than some of the other zones is that ability to have people residing in it for short amounts of time. So some of the examples that you suggested, like an MRI machine, that wouldn't have that component to it. So this would, removing this would likely not have an impact on some of those other uses. If it was a location that had beds and people were staying there, so maybe like situations like sleep studies and things like that, it may, but this is also for a longer period, that up to generally to 6 weeks as well. So that's the key part of this emergency care establishment that probably wouldn't be required for a lot of those other uses and medical uses that you've mentioned.
Councillor. Thank you. Okay, we have a motion moved and second. I'll look one more time if someone wants to speak to it. Seeing none, I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-1.
Okay, moving on. 3.4, this is regarding 530 Oxford Street West. I'll look for a motion to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Frank, seconded by Councillor Rahman, and I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Any questions of technical nature of the committee for staff? Seeing none, I'll ask if the applicant would like to address the committee. Please, sir, give us your name and you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Scott Allen. I'm with MHBC Planning. We are acting on behalf of the applicant, and with me this afternoon are several members of our project team available to answer questions. At this time, we'd like to advise the committee that we have reviewed the planning staff report and support its findings and recommendations. In particular, we concur with the finding that the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement, that is in keeping and aligns with the policy direction of the London Plan, and that the site is appropriate for the proposal, and as is the local development context. These findings also reflect the recommendations and findings of our planning justification report submitted in support of this application. And Mr. Chair, please be advised that with approval of this application, the applicant intends to advance the project expeditiously to site plan approval. Thank you to staff as well for all their work involved with this application, particularly crafting the proposed zoning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'd gladly answer any questions committee members may have.
Thank you. I'll look for members of the public that would like to address the committee. Please, ma'am, give us your name and you have 5 minutes.
My name is Anna Maria Velastro. So this whole area is being planned in a piecemeal fashion. There's absolutely no strategy to make this area work for the people that currently live there and for the people that will be living there. This building has no green space. It has no place for mothers to take their kids out and play. There's no place to walk your dog. There's no place for the dog to go to the bathroom except on the sidewalk. There's no green space in the entire area. There's no parks unless you're going to start including private property like the cemeteries or Cherry Hill Mall or the older buildings across the street, which actually have grounds and community gardens for their residents. It just feels very disorganized and badly planned. You're approving buildings and you're rubber stamping developments as the developer brings them to you, and you're not considering how it's going to work as a community as a whole. And so if you have children, would you live in a building like this? And if the answer is no, then this building has to be thinner, it has to have grounds, it has to have a place for people to go. It has to have a place where dogs can go to the bathroom. And there has to be a place where people can walk. Okay, there's no place for people to walk other than walk in traffic. There's no relief. It's too dense. It's not that you can't put a tall building in this space, but it's time that this committee start planning for people what it's like to live in these buildings, what it's like to live in these neighborhoods, and understand the fact that we need green space everywhere, but in particular in this neighborhood. I challenge anyone on this committee to point to a space that is green where people can go and get away from the heavy traffic on Oxford Street, on Wonderland Street, and on Beaverbrook. And I just want to remind the chair of this committee that it wasn't that long ago that he made the same comments when they wanted to build towers on Capulet. He raised the same concerns on behalf of his community, and so those still stand today. So you're planning this neighborhood in a piecemeal fashion in the eyes of developers that bring things to you. You don't scrutinize them. You rubber stamp these applications. This neighborhood is already hot. There are climate change issues. This building isn't going to absorb any of its own runoff. My guess is that it's going to hold its dirty water somewhere at the bottom of the building and then slowly release it into the Thames River. That just causes flooding downstream. There's no low-impact development applied to this building, which apparently is something we're supposed to do. And if you're thinking that children and families and mothers aren't going to live in this building, it's not designed for those type of people, then you're segregating populations, and my understanding is that's prohibited. to make decisions about who's going to live where. So every building that you approve has to work for every person in this society, and that includes children, it includes senior citizens, it includes families. And this building doesn't work because there's no green space and the entire area is just traffic, traffic, traffic. Thank you.
I'll look for the next speaker. Please, sir, give us your name and you have 5 minutes.
My name is Angus Johnson. Thanks to the chairman and the committee for giving me an opportunity to present my ideas to you. Mitigating global warming will require unprecedented efforts from industry, agriculture, and cities. The main responsibility of cities is dealing with the greenhouse gas emissions of their cars. I'm going to talk about the specific implications of this development on the GHG emissions being produced in the city by first looking at the current picture of the emissions in the city. The only document I know that really shows this pattern is the Raynham-Dalhousie map, which is attached to the information I've given you. What is unique about this map is it displays emissions by area, and it does show considerable variations in the amount of emissions present in the city. For example, there are wards with 4 different emission amounts. London, like other cities in Ontario, has a commitment to reduce GHG levels by 2050. If that commitment is lived up to, this map should look different. If the Raynham team, for example, was able to return and test again and record results on a new map, we should see the colors overall change downward, reflecting what should generally be lower levels of emissions in the cities. The problem with the 530 Oxford development and with all the projects for this area is the potential increase in GHG emissions they'll cause. This building is completed, it becomes a base for 646 cars, our count, adding the daily traffic in the existing complement of emissions in this community, inevitably raising those emissions in other areas on commute routes, and effectively pushing emission reduction targets further away. In Toronto, 25-story and higher buildings surround subway stations with much less car accommodation. Torontonians' car dependency rate is half of London's, 0.33, and every day 500,000 people, London's population, by the way, commute to school or work or whatever back and forth, 1 million trips in total using mass transit. If London had a real mass transit, cars would be reduced. But building out the Oxford area to imitate Yonge and St. Clair without a subway underneath is a lunacy that could produce a massive emission spewing congested traffic. What the Raynham map also shows, because of its detailed look at London, is vegetation's reduction effect on emissions. The emission reduction helps to reach targets, effectively shortening the time to get there. Those emissions vegetation removes are just as much that needs to be dealt with. Admittedly, 530 Oxford is built on existing pavement, and it isn't removing vegetation to create housing, but neither does it really create significant vegetation in its planning. That sort of thing should now be a requirement for any development to actually create new vegetation areas. While we've been working hard to deliver that dual message, we've not delivered another message that follows from the map about Londoners who are doing a lot of the heavy lifting in protecting vegetation in the city. A protection which benefits not just them, but everyone else. A kind of example. My neighbor and I are lucky enough to own houses on well-treed lots, more common, say, from 100 years ago. The vegetation we own is making a considerable contribution to the reduction of GHG emissions. And we pay for that with our own effort and expense. If I clear the vegetation and transform the yard into an apartment complex, putting a few hundred cars a day onto the street, I leave my neighbor and his vegetation with the harder residual job of reducing existing emissions now on my dime. We've not begun to show the public and the non-public the importance of protecting vegetation, and this means any vegetation you can think of. Much private residential, but also parks, cemeteries, playing fields, and golf courses. And it doesn't matter if this vegetation contains invasive species or trees that are out of favor with naturalists, it all removes emissions. More needs to be done to recognize and support the contributors
30
and to
seconds.
underline the responsibilities we all should be sharing. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look for the next speaker. I'll ask clerk if there's anyone online. Okay. Seeing no one else in the gallery wishes to address the committee, I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Councillor Frank, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lewis. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
I'll go to Councillor Frank.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to put the staff's recommendation on the floor with some additional site plan amendments that I have circulated. I forgot my rubber stamp today, so I just wanted to add a couple of these amendments here to deal with some of the issues that I noticed, including recognizing that it is in an area that has a heat island effect, given that it's surrounded by parking lot. So some of these amendments clear that up, but I would need a seconder perhaps before I continue speaking.
So I'll look for a seconder. Deputy Mayor Lewis. Do you want to speak to it now, Councillor? Please go ahead.
Thank you. So I'll just read the additional items for the people online, just in case they can't see them. So the additional site plan amendments include utilize the visual markers, etched or stained glass to provide bird-friendly glazing, adhering to the bird-friendly CSA, investigate renewable energy sources for the buildings and non-fossil fuel-based energy sources for heating and cooling, and provide additional landscaping to assist with stormwater management and reduce the heat island effect. These are similar additional site plan amendments that we have done on other buildings in the past, and I thought it was important to include them on this location. I do agree with some of the comments that there's not a lot of green space in this area for people who live in these two, or people who will live in these two apartment buildings if it moves forward, although there is, I know that there'll be some access to Mud Creek. When we're done all that work, there'll be some active trails through there, but it is a bit of a jaunt if you do have kids in a wagon. So trying to reduce as much of those impacts as possible, I think is important, but recognizing, I was trying to figure out ways to include a little park or parkette on the ground, although it'd be a very hot little parkette because it would be surrounded by a parking lot. So perhaps not the most ideal location either. That being said, recognizing that infill is better than sprawl, although I know no one likes that word, sorry I used it, but recognizing that infill is our preferred approach, the ideal being that we're going to be building a better transportation network out in this area, and thanks to councillors at Civic Works this morning for reminding us of the need to look at this area more thoroughly from a transportation management approach. So I will support the staff recommendation, hope to have support on these additional amendments, and appreciate the work of the applicant to continue providing more housing within the city.
I'll look for other comments. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Chair, and happy to support Councillor Frank's amendments there. They certainly are amendments that we've applied to some other applications in the past, and I agree that they're worth looking at site plan approval here as well. As we know with site plan approval, it's not going to mean that they're all or any of them get included, but at least it gets looked at in the site plan review process. So happy to support that. I want to pick up on a couple of things that Councillor Frank referenced, though. I'm not going to call it sprawl, but I'm going to call it ex-urban growth, because that's the real danger. And actually, while I appreciate Mr. Young's passion, it's the same, or Mr. Johnson's passion, sorry, it's the same challenge that I have with this heat map that we see over and over again being submitted on development applications. It actually doesn't speak to the fact that London is not an island. And we have, every time we develop infill within the city, we are actually protecting prime agricultural land from ex-urban growth sprawl out in the county. That has to be taken into account as we address our housing needs, because we've certainly seen sprawl develop out in the county on pieces of land that used to be prime agricultural or woodlot lands. So London does not stand alone. Even within the city, yes, I actually do expect there to be areas that are more heat zones than others, because that is where our industrial and our commercial realities exist. And when those are concentrated in an area, Out in my ward, I've got a significant industrial area. I expect emissions to be higher along Veterans Memorial Parkway, where goods are being shipped in and out of the city every day. That's the reality of living in the city. And the same with green space. Not everybody is going to walk out their front door and enjoy green space, just as not everybody's going to walk out their front door and have a transit stop in front of their home, or walk out their front door. And in some cases, in some of the developments we're approving, not everybody's going to walk out their front door and have a parking space, because we've adopted reduced parking requirements and gotten rid of some of the requirements that were creating these islands of asphalt out there. And what we have now is a proposal that's going to turn some commercial space into a mixed use, create two attractive looking new buildings, provide many more units of housing. But I think it's important to recognize as well that as we talk about these developments in this area, because it was alluded to about the transportation in the area, these buildings aren't going to all appear tomorrow. There will be site plan approval processes, there will be tenders that go out, there will be construction that happens, and what we are going to see is development over time. At the same time, the work that our staff is doing right now on the master mobility plan will be coming forward, and believe me, I know that Ms. Scher and her team are looking at where the growth is happening as they're developing that MMP as well. And so these things will come together at the same time. Nothing is going to change overnight for anyone. It will be a slow, progressive change in how the neighborhood looks as buildings come online, as transportation changes happen. So very supportive of getting this application moving. We know that we've got a builder here who's got a reputation for building. They've said they're going to move as quickly as they can on this. I believe they will. And we will bring more housing online in the city through this, so very supportive. Thank Councillor Frank for her amendments, though. I know she's always mindful of that bird-friendly etching, which I know is important to a number of people, so glad to see and happy to support that being in there.
Thank you. Other councillors that wish to address the committee? Councillor Tressau.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to address my comments through the chair. In many ways, I could cut this short by just incorporating by reference the comments that I made with respect to 735 Wonderland. But I think that there are some differences between this project and the last one, so I do want to make some comments. In my view, to take the position that infill is better than sprawl, that's a truism. But there's all sorts of infill. I'm looking at some of the other projects that are going to be coming down the way that are built on ample open space, where people are going to be able to walk out of their apartment buildings and not have to step on a hot heat zone parking lot with no human amenities that one would expect in a residence. So yes, while it's true, infill is better than sprawl, bad infill is not as good as infill. And in my view, with all due respect to the successful developer, this is an example of bad infill. And I think we can do better. And just because we do not want to engage in sprawl-type activities does not mean that we have to, without criticism and without adequate study of other unanticipated consequences, go down the line of saying, well, we're trying to get to our housing goals, and yes, this is a bit shoehorned on a parking lot. You know, and again, it's kids go down and play in the parking lot. Go walk the dog on the parking lot. I just think we could be doing better than that. Now, I would like to raise the issue that I raised with respect to 735, and I won't go through the more lengthy process of asking staff questions. I mean, because I know what the answers are from reading the reports, and there's just not an adequate attention to the cumulative. And I'm stressing the word cumulative. That's the operative word here. There has not been enough attention to the cumulative effects of intense development in the same facility when the reason why we're able to go this high in the sky is because we're in a transit corridor. We're in a transit area, and that anticipates being able to go in this case pretty close to what you'd expect downtown. Now, I think that we need to be taking another look at that, and I understand that there is not going to be support on this council for a serious holding provision, to have some adequate traffic and transit study to support what's going on here. But even if we could do that with respect to this project, I still think there are fundamental flaws with this project. I most certainly will be voting against this project at City Council. And I really want to applaud the folks that came to speak out against this, because I know it's difficult. It's difficult in this atmosphere of we have to build, we have to build, we have to meet our targets. If you're against the building, you're in NIMBY. These are not NIMBY issues that are being raised here. These are serious, substantial, environmental and transit and traffic-oriented, human-oriented problems. So again, I think that this is not the type of development that we want to be promoting. I will be voting against this at the City Council. I can see where the direction is with this committee on this. I understand that. I respect that. But I am going to continue to raise these issues. So with that, I think I'll just thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here again.
Thank you, Councilor. Other comments? Councilor Purple.
Thank you. I completely understand and agree with the cumulative effects in terms of the transportation. And as we talked about earlier today, they need to be, and they will be addressed, no doubt. I keep hearing, we do have the targets, 2031, 47,000 units. And yes, would I like to accomplish it? Absolutely, I would. But that's not my priority. My priority is affordable housing for many, many people that need it. And when I say affordable, I'm not talking about deeply affordable for homeless or anything like this in this perspective of this development. But I'm truly a believer in, if you look at economics 101, supply and demand, and that is what it comes down to. And we do need the supply to increase drastically to get the pricing that is affordable. And I truly believe that that's our path. And I'm not going to say that this, with the supply, that we are going to see 30, 40, 50% less than what we see now. No, but if the supply is there, before the pandemic, there were apartment buildings that were offering 1 month free. Why? Because the supply was much higher than the demand. And we got to get to that situation. So yes, we keep saying that we look after these targets, the 47,000 units. For me, that's a number I would like to achieve, but more importantly, we need to have high supply so we can affordable housing for the many, many Londoners who really, truly need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Other comments? Councilor Rahman.
Thank you, and through you, I will be supporting the application that's in front of us, mainly because one of the issues I have concerns with, not within this application, but from a transportation perspective, we're working on addressing through our conversation at CWC, as well as conversations that we've had at council. The transit village designation, yes, it allows for the higher density, but again, I feel like it's a bit of a misnomer when we don't have that higher order transit in the area already, which is, again, to Mr. Johnson's point as well. I think that ultimately that's, the chicken and the egg debate that we continue to have. The problem, I think, is that the public thinks that it is also in our hands whether or not we get that higher order transit, and it is not entirely, it is a partnership between funders at the federal level as well. And so I think by even approving these, and as Deputy Mayor Lewis said, these are not all going to be built tomorrow, but by approving applications in this area, we are setting the stage for the conversation with other levels of government around the density that we've approved in the area to then make for the case for additional transit support as the MMP our master mobility plan is put forward that hopefully supports that addition of more transit in this area, as well as other transportation solutions to help address the issues. But I did have a question for staff, and it relates to the notes around amenity space. I saw that and I too would like to see some sort of connection, amenity space or something of that sort. And I understand that that's not part of this application. When I'm trying to look at the location in relationship to Mud Creek and whether or not there's any pathways or consideration for access, I'm just wondering if that's something that will be discussed during site plan. Is there a way to access some of those trails that people are talking about?
I'll go staff.
Thank you, and through the chair. To start off with your last question, there is an existing connection through Medway Creek. As part of the project there, additional trails will be built. This also will be looked at through the site plan approval stage within the property itself. Further, the applicant is proposing both indoor and outdoor amenity space in the podium on the 6th floor, as well as on the rooftop of the two proposed buildings, providing additional space for families or children or residents in the building. And as part of this, there will also be improvements to the parking area. There's a landscape plan attached to this project that will improve both the frontage on Oxford and Wonderland Road, as well as the existing service parking lot with additional trees and green space. Thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you. That's good to hear, and I'm pleased that those considerations and conversations have been happening. And with parkland dedication, what does that look like for this property?
Staff.
Through the chair, parkland dedication will be required as part of site plan approval.
Councillor.
Thank you. And I just want to quickly talk about, again, when we talk about cumulative impact, I do think we need to be having more of a conversation around cumulative impact as it relates to park and naturalized spaces in the area. Right now, our parkland policy is that funding for a parkland dedication fund doesn't actually directly support that neighborhood of which the funds are being taken from. So this, because the developer has put money towards the parkland dedication, it would not go into this specific area necessarily. And personally, I think that should be something we look at considering, and I'm not sure how we would do that, but considering that there's so many developments planned in this area that are going to require parkland dedication if they do not have green space, we need to be looking at how do we offset that and what kind of green space amenities are potentially in the area that we could be looking at, whether they belong to us or not, to be able to do more offsets within the area. And I know this is an issue that we got into in the Northwest. It's partially the reason why I think neighbors feel the way they feel about the lack of green space in the area. And so I agree, we have to think about these as full community conversations as we're planning, and welcome that conversation further at the right committee.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from committee members or visiting councilors? If the committee would allow me a few comments from the chair. Right now, this is currently a commercial, pretty big commercial plaza. So to replace concrete with concrete, as far as a heat map is concerned, I think right now, I look at this as a good trade-off. It's a high-intensity development providing over 400 units, which is substantial. As Councillor Pribble alluded to, the way we're going to get to affordable housing is increasing the supply in the market, and this goes a long way to that. There was a comment by the gallery about my non-support of a development farther west down the road. The reason for that was because I didn't like the transition into the neighborhood right beside it. This is different. This is right at the corner. What's around it is commercial. I see it as a step along to what we had discussed on the greater idea of where the city wants to move in planning neighborhoods, where you can actually get to commercial stores and services without having to take your car or take your bike. There's a substantial amount of services right at this corner that tenants of this development could access just by foot. So from that standpoint alone, I think that goes a long way to achieving the idea of a smaller carbon footprint. You're never, when faced with challenges such as homelessness, as we talked about earlier this afternoon, and affordable housing or housing, you know, there's never going to be a perfect solution. People don't want intensity because of concerns of heat mapping or traffic congestion, but we also don't want urban sprawl because you're going farther out paving over farmland, and those people are coming in by cars a longer distance. You're never going to find that perfect solution. That being said, you can get to a good solution, and I think this provides that. I do have concerns, obviously, about traffic congestion in the area, but that has been touched upon by Councillor Trusso and Councillor Rahman. I think I look forward to the master mobility plan. I keep touching on that. I can't wait to see it, because with intensifications come severe challenges in how we get around. And get around effectively, for sure, transit, but transit that does provide a credible, cost-efficient solution to make people consider using mass transit as opposed to their private cars. So I look forward, and we'll be pressing for solutions to be presented to council as this Wonderland Oxford corner, which is already heavily congested, will only continue in that regard, as well as the whole stretch of Wonderland between Springbank Drive up to Sarnia Road especially, and again on Oxford Street, the bottleneck at Oxford and Warncliffe, which unfortunately that project was put on hold due to the cost overruns of BRT. The developer has been a terrific local asset in bringing on much needed housing. They get stuff done. You know, Councillor Frank's additions there, I know they're open to such suggestions in developing not only a lot of housing, but very good, good projects. I look forward to seeing the one downtown. Very excited about that, because like that one, this one too will change the skyline in the West End. So I'm supportive of this. Look forward to seeing this come online, but I also look forward to the city answering very concerning questions about how we get through these areas. So I'll look for any other further comments or questions before I call a vote. Got a motion moved and seconded. I'll open up for a vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, moving on to 3.5. This is regarding environmental housekeeping amendment to the London Plan. I understand the Deputy Mayor wants to speak to that, so I'll go to you first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and through you, I'm prepared to move staff's recommendation, but there is one exception to that, which is in Appendix A, Policy 1335, which speaks to the process that involves the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. And I just want to refer that particular policy back to staff for some clarifying language for it to come forward. So I believe that the clerk has some language prepared in eScribe. I'm just going to refresh so I can read what's actually in there rather than what I sent by email, because I know it had to be adjusted slightly.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Yep.
This is part of the public participation meeting. So we need to go to the public first. I was a little quick off the mark there.
Oh, sorry. Well, then you were quick off the mark, so come back to me when you're ready.
I will. My error. So I'll look for a motion to open the PPM. Councilor Rahman, second by Councilor Frank. I'll open the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. And I will now go to the public. I see Mr. Wallace is there, is probably wondering what I was doing.
No.
But please go ahead, sir. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for committee for hearing us. Listen, we sent this out when it came out from staff, and I think this is the third or fourth housekeeping report that we've gotten since the London Plan was approved a couple of years ago. We agree 100% that there's nothing wrong with housekeeping amendments that say the province of Ontario has changed the name from natural resources, or it is natural resources now, it was something in forestry before. Those are truly housekeeping wording changes that need to be happen. But we want to be on the record that going forward, Mr. Chair, that there are a number of changes that are in here that have our eyebrows raised, and we don't consider them housekeeping. And just for an example, you'll see in the report that talks about maps, and that a number of applicants or number of landowners, the recommendations that had come forward, those have been in this report have been changed. So we thank you, staff for doing that work. But just so you understand what it was, they were allocating on maps that are in the London Plan, that are policy, on properties that were not evaluated yet, that there had been no application on. So all we're saying going forward, and there's a number of changes, and I'm not sure what the councillors, which clause he's after, but, you know, dealing with the O's, you've got underlined here, before it was the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System, and confirmed by the Ministry of, it was Development and Northern Development and Mines is now Natural Resources, but they've added in by the city and accepted. Since when? So this is 78 pages. It's not housekeeping. My recommendation going forward to work with the industry on this, on these items in advance, so we're not trying to do this at a public meeting. And of course, we're here so that if one of my members and my members decide that we need to appeal this, we're at the public meeting putting on notice that we're not happy with some of the things here. We're not moving anything. We're not asking for any changes. Staff were very good at working with some of my members on specific items. But I think couching it as housekeeping for you people, for council, is inaccurate. And so I think that we want to be on record that there are very much some housekeeping things here, but there's some other things that have more substantial ramifications than housekeeping. So thank you for your time, and I wouldn't mind knowing what clause he's referring to. Thank you.
Thank you. Other speakers? Please, ma'am, can you give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Stephanie Pratt. I'm here from the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority. Some of the information I'm going to speak to today does align with the information that was provided earlier by Tracy Annett and Jenna Elaine in regards to the work we've been doing with the city. So I would just like to take the opportunity to thank staff for all the work we did back and forth on these policies. There were a fair share of changes that came from the initial circulation to the circulation you see before you today. We did provide comments both from our regulatory perspective as well as from our landowner perspective, and some of our landowner comments did align with those brought forward by Mike Wallace as well in relation to the changes to some features on our lands that were mapped. Most of our comments were taken into consideration and updated through the policy updates. Largely, most of the changes that came forward were as a result of the new draft PPS that was released in April of 2024. This new PPS did come out after the policies were circulated, and so some of those inclusions weren't included in the original draft, but have been included today as part of the revised submission. So one of the biggest changes was in regards to collaboration with the Conservation Authority and planning authorities, especially in regards to mapping and other policy changes as they come forward related to natural hazards. In regards to mapping, we do have a number of updates that we're doing and working closely with the city to make sure that those are included. It's really important that those updates to mapping within the official plan as well as our regulatory mapping are consistent to make sure that it sets appropriate development standards moving forward. So we look forward to working with staff as those mapping updates come forward in the future. And as Jenna alluded to, we're going to begin the public consultation process later on in 2024. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the next speaker. Please go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
I'm not sure if you realize this, but when Mr. Wallace speaks, he's never asked to give his name. He's just told to speak. So that, to me, is very problematic. He's here all the time.
I'm going to stop you right there.
Okay, I'm making a point.
That's not true. I asked Mr. Wallace's name earlier today.
Yeah. Well,
As I did ask you.
Right.
But this time around, I did not ask you again because you already addressed this committee.
okay, I appreciate that. So if the building association has problems with some of the issues in the environmental changes, I see that as a positive thing because they're always fighting environmental protection regulations. I understand the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority having issues. If their mapping doesn't align properly, that's important. But as far as threatening an appeal, simply because they don't like some of the changes, I find that really offensive. And because the public doesn't have the same weight, it doesn't have the same weight as a Mr. Wallace. And so if they don't like the changes, I see that as a positive thing because that means there's strong changes or, they're considering impacts that are independent. It's an independent audit, and that's the way it should be. So if they want to appeal something, let them, but as far as threatening and influencing this committee, I don't see anyone seeing that as a threat or asking them to slow down or stop talking. So I don't like that. And I don't think it's the same comments that were made by the Upper Thames. Those comments, you do need to have mapping that's aligned to make sure everyone's on the same page. But just because you don't like something and you're going to threaten an appeal, I don't think that should influence the decision here today.
Look for other speakers. I'll ask clerk if there's anyone online. I see no other speakers wishing to address the committee, so I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Councillor Rahman, seconded by Councillor Frank. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, and now I'll go back to the Deputy Mayor, who was so rudely interrupted by myself for my mistakes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and so through you, I'll just start again. I'm moving the staff recommendation, however, adding, with the exception of policy 1335 in Appendix A, and that policy 1335 be referred back to Civic Administration to provide some clarifying language to reflect that the MNRF has jurisdiction over approving the O's submissions.
Okay, thank you, and I believe the clerk has that up in front of us now. I'll look for a seconder to the motion. Councillor Rahman seconds, so we have a motion moved in second, and I'll open the floor for discussion, debate. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, and I'm just going to be brief on this. Mr. Wallace touched on it, but I'd already had this flagged, and I talked to staff. They can provide some clarifying language if this comes back, just to outline clearly in our policies what the process is when those evaluations happen, and that it is in fact the ministry that makes a decision and then forwards that submission or that decision to both council and the Conservation Authority. So that's really their provincial jurisdiction, and that needs to be reflected accurately in the London Plan policies as well. So that's the reason for the amendment to this. I will say on the main motion from staff, I did have some questions. And actually, a couple of them were around particulars of the mapping, but there is where I would say to all colleagues that there's real value in chatting with staff ahead of time about some of this, because I found out that in fact, it was just, you know, a little bit of an adjustment that needed to be made in the report in terms of where the lines were on the map. It was never intended to change a particular thing. That happens, as I referenced earlier today, when you draw lines on the city's website map. Yeah, those meters can have a meter or two of error because they are aerial and they're approximations. So I appreciate the work that the staff has done on this. You know, there was a concern that I was going to raise, but I don't have to raise it now because staff was able to answer it for me. And that's the kind of back and forth that I think is really helpful to have when these kind of things, because there are a lot of changes in here, but I think a lot of them are housekeeping, although I hear Mr. Wallace's point that some of them aren't, and hence that's why 1335 is one I think needs to go back, because I think we need to be a little more clear in terms of what that policy is saying.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from committee members or visiting councilors? Clerk. The clerk has advised me that the same additional wording needs to be added. So section 34, bracket 17 of the Planning Act, no further notice be given. You can add that to your motion. Are you okay with that? And the seconder is good with that. So we are good with that. Okay. So given there's no further discussion, we got a motion moved and seconded. We'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, moving on to 3.6 regarding 193 to 199 College Avenue. I'll look for a motion to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Frank, seconded by Councillor Rahman. Call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Look for anyone that would like to address the committee and the public. Please, sir, give us your name and you have 5 minutes.
I'm Steve Tanton. I live at 189 College Ave with my wife Marianne. And I just have a statement. Obviously, we are the closest property being right next door to, and of course, okay. I'd like to express my strong opposition to the proposed housing development in our neighborhood. While I understand the need for more affordable housing in our city, this project will have a detrimental impact on our neighborhood. First and foremost, the proposed development is too large for our area and the street. It's a very narrow street. The increase in population density would put a strain on our already busy street, leading to an increase in traffic congestion and noise pollution. I know there was a traffic study done regarding this project. It did not include the new tower at St. James and Talbot. So that traffic assessment report is obsolete. Additionally, the construction of this project would result in significant damage to the existing historic homes destroying the nuance of the immediate area, and putting our financial and mental health at risk. These existing homes, replacement values are in excess of millions of dollars. They've been there forever. Ours is a historic monument, priority 1, historically significant and architecturally significant. Of course, we're going to be the most affected, and our insurance company has given us a replacement cost in the excess of millions of dollars. So any damage with this type of construction, it's inevitable with the noise and vibration. If you limit the, if we don't change the zoning and have no amendments, or don't pass the amendments, that limits them to build, if they want to develop it, it limits them to build a more reasonable, smaller project that will not create as much noise and vibration. A 6-story concrete tower requires a lot of digging and vibration. So, furthermore, the type of housing being proposed is simply not keeping in character with their neighborhood. This development would bring in a large number of residents with no obvious interest in historical architecture, which could lead to other negative social effects. This would also drastically alter the aesthetics of our area, replacing an existing historic streetscape with a monolithic high-density tower that will be obsolete in a few years. Finally, I'm deeply concerned about the impact this development will have on the property values in the surrounding area. This development will leave us isolated as the only house left on the street, and will obviously result in a decline in our property values. Myself, as a real estate broker for over 20 years, know this fact all too well. In conclusion, I strongly urge you to reconsider this proposed zoning change. While I recognize the need for affordable housing, this project is not affordable, and I believe that this project is simply not the right fit. Thank you.
Thank you. Look for other speakers. Please go ahead, you have 5 minutes.
So when Londoners supported the London plan about inward, upward, they were also promised preserving neighborhood character, leafy streets. It was a balancing act, and that hasn't been happening. That's not happening anymore. And so the houses that this building is replacing were heritage houses. They were affordable housing. And now we have a building that's oversized on a tiny little street. And staff is correct. It's burgeoning and it's insensitive to that neighborhood. And it defies what people thought the London plan would be. And so in my personal opinion, the application just ahead of this one was rubber stamped with minor amendments. And I don't think you can do anything to this building other than make it smaller, give it more space, to bring out the character of that neighborhood. It's very stressful for residents to feel like their neighborhood is out of control because committee has become insensitive to their comments. And so neighborhoods should be preserved. Obviously, there's change coming, but the change needs to be sensitive to what's going on in that neighborhood. So I hope you do respect the staff recommendation for refusal. If you're not familiar with this neighborhood, you need to be familiar with these streets when you make these decisions. And as a landlord, I can tell you that when you offer people 1 month free, that's been going on forever. It has nothing to do with a housing glut. They have their own reasons for doing that. It's not an indicator that you're being successful in creating more units, and you have to keep rubber stamping these buildings because somehow you think it's working. Okay, that's not true. I just had to say that. I'm a landlord. I had to flag that. Mr. Councillor Pryville. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Please, ma'am, give us your name and you have 5 minutes.
Yes, my name is Jacqueline Farquhar, and I live about 2 blocks from the development that you've been talking about. I would like to take a second just to give you a little background. This application came to our neighborhood, and we had a meeting with the developer or his representatives in the year 2016. So we have been waiting with bated breath for 8 years on this application. It is, I agree with everything the previous speakers have said, Anne-Marie and Mr. Tanton. I'd just like to give you the size of this street. It is a very tiny street. It's 1 block between Richmond and St. George. And on the north side is Marion Villa Long-Term Care. And on the south side, where this building is being proposed, it is 6 stories high on this tiny little street, 6 stories high at the front and 4 stories at the back. The back 4 stories are going to be, in any construction will be very destructive to Mr. Tanton's property and all the properties on St. James that back onto it. Lovely houses. It's a very intense development of a tiny property. Now, it looks like a nice building, but I would maintain it is completely improperly located. I would think that York would do far better to remove that or to take that building elsewhere. It's certainly not site sensitive or compatible to the single-family homes on Old North. So the staff recommendation is great. They obviously have done a lot of work on it. They are recommending refusal, and I hope that that carries. I also am curious, I don't know whether anybody can tell me, but I understand that it's already at the OLT, the Ontario Land Tribunal, and it's being heard on June the 6th. We, public, can be part of that by Zoom, but I'm curious to know how the what the OLT decision, of course, will come down, and whether we have any right of appeal if that OLT decision goes in favor of the developer. Is there any staff member who can advise us on that? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Look for the next speaker. Anyone online, clerk? No. There's no one online. Seeing no one else, I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Councillor Frank, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lewis. Call the vote.
My screen is being weird. Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, and I'll just go to staff on the question raised by our one speaker there. Can we have an update on where this stands with the OLT? And I'm not too sure if you can comment on appeals by other parties other than the city, but if you could speak to that as well.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So the attendance is on June 10th at the Ontario Land Tribunal. It's a case management conference. So the substance of this matter won't be dealt with. It's a first appearance type of proceeding. And at that time, neighbors or any interested parties can attend, can request status as either a party or a participant. And the Ontario Land Tribunal's rules would explain the difference in those roles, how to make those requests, et cetera. So I wouldn't provide legal advice to anyone that's interested in doing that, but direct them to the tribunal's rules.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to committee now. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm actually going to move an alternate motion, which is, and I think it's important to be clear, we're not approving a zoning today. What we're doing is endorsing a position, either support or refuse, for the Ontario Land Tribunal hearing on the 10th as outlined. So this is not a council decision. It is already going to the OLT. This is a request for us to take a position that yes, we support the development or no, we don't from a council perspective. So I am going to move actually an alternate recommendation to the staffs, which is that council endorse this application as submitted. And then we'll look to see if there's a seconder, and I'll provide my reasoning why.
Okay. I'll look for a seconder. Councilor Hillier has seconded. So a motion moved and second. I'll go back to the Deputy Mayor.
So through you, Chair, you know, we've heard how out of character this building would be, but we heard reference to the Marion Villa across the street, 6 stories there. Behind 193 and 199 College Ave, we have a 4-story on St. James. At the end on St. George Street, we have both 4-story as well as actually the 12-story at Grosvenor Gate. We have the Mount Hope Long-Term Care Center, again, rising multiple stories. This is not a conversion to a high density. This is a medium density. This is a 6-story. It's in keeping with what is behind it. It is in keeping with what is on the other side of the road from it on College Ave. It is not out of character with existing buildings on this street. And so for that reason, I am moving that council take the position that we endorse the application. This one is a little more complicated because it's been in the queue so long, as one resident referenced, that there's still, even in the staff report, references to our 1989 official plan, which is no longer in force and effect, which speaks to why we're endorsing a position with OLT. We're endorsing a position one way or the other because of a non-decision of a previous council on this application. Not a refusal, not a support, an actual non-decision. So I'm not going to go into the history of how it got there, but the fact is it's already actually out of our hands at the OLT. But if this application were to come before us today brand new, I would be supporting it. It is in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. It is 6 stories. It is not high density. It is medium density. And it's the kind of infill that we often hear we should be seeking. I regularly hear, oh, 12 stories is too big, 20 stories is too big. You know, why can't people build 6 or 8? Well, we've got an application for a 6, and I'm going to be supportive of that.
Thank you. Other speakers? Okay. Councilor Trosau.
If I may, through the chair, ask the staff, and I'm not going to ask you to go through your official plan justifications, because I think they were very well stated, succinct, easy to understand, sound, and legally correct. I'm not going to ask you to go through the same exercise for the general zoning bylaw, because I think you've done the same thing. And what this demonstrates to me is that there is some really important and valuable sensitivity on the part of the staff to understand the different types of neighborhoods that we have in our community. And this is a very tiny little sub-neighborhood that's squeezed within a couple of big streets. Now, if this application were on Richmond Street, this would not be a problem. It would not even be an issue. In fact, it would be welcome. And to talk about the huge high-rise that's going up at St. James, which is on a huge tract. It's just not, it's not apples, it's just not even apples and watermelons, I don't know what you would call it, but it's not even close to this. While I'm not gonna go through the official plan the calculus here, the zoning calculus, could you at least spend a moment and go through the special provisions that we have for the near campus neighborhood? Because yes, do you remember the near campus neighborhood? We just had quite a bit of discussion about the near campus neighborhood, and this is in the middle of the near campus neighborhood. Could you go through could you just walk us through the analysis as to why this is not an appropriate development on an interior of the block in the near campus neighborhood, even though it's across the street from Marion Villa?
I'll go to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to the counselor. The near campus neighborhoods are planned in such a way to strategically locate growth and plan for residential intensification in a proactive and coordinated comprehensive fashion. So as part of that, we look for consolidating parcels of land on more major streets and directing those to areas that are planned for medium-density residential and high-density residential forms of development. This site does not meet that criteria. It's planned for low-density residential, and it's not on a higher-order street. And so we are of the opinion that there will be impacts on the neighborhood and that it does not satisfy that criteria and the policies for the near-campus neighborhoods.
Counselor?
And just to be clear, there's been a lot of discussion lately about revisions that we've been making to the near campus neighborhood. The near campus neighborhood guidelines that you're referring to here are in full force and effect and are not the subject of what is under dispute right now with respect to the four units on a single residential property. Is that right?
Go to staff.
Through the chair, that is correct. These are policies that are in full force and effect.
Counselor?
And in fact, if this application were approved, it would totally upend, disrupt, and really invalidate any meaning that the near campus neighborhood regulations have. Or am I overreacting to that?
I'll go to staff.
So through the chair, as previously mentioned, through our analysis, we've determined that the proposed development does not satisfy the policies for near campus neighborhoods and is not in conformity with those policies.
Counselor?
If I went back and talked to any resident of your neighborhood, I'm sorry, the St. George neighborhood, Roughdale, Bishop Helmuth, Old North, and said, really, you need to be very concerned about the fact that all of the work that we've done over the years on the near campus neighborhood criteria are really out the window now, because if a developer can come in and put this in the middle of a street, you really need to be worrying about it on yours. Would that be an overreaction?
I'll go to staff.
Through the chair, from a planning perspective, we review every application on a site-specific basis based on the policies that are current. So every application would be reviewed against the policies in force, and our recommendation would be based on those policies.
Counselor?
So I'm thinking in terms of an application for a similar-sized building that is not on a main street, that is not on Richmond, that is not on Adelaide, that is not on Oxford, that is on a side street. Even though you evaluate each application separately, is it not true that this would send somewhat of a chill through the neighborhood?
Counselor, I don't know if that they can comment on whether this would send a chill through the neighborhood. Maybe rephrase your question to get away from opinion and more kind of fact-based.
Well, what I'm trying to understand is how this decision that's on the table right now will affect the quality of life and the security of the neighborhood and the understanding that people have about promises that the city has made to them in terms of planning documents throughout not just this block, but throughout the entire near campus neighborhood, throughout all of Old North. So maybe chill wasn't the right word, but I do believe fundamentally that this would give people a lot of cause to worry. And I do not see any countervailing policy in the documents that the staff has provided for us that would override the official plan, the zoning bylaw, and the near campus neighborhood guidelines. So on all grounds, I would argue that the staff report must be sustained. And this is very dangerous territory. And this is my opinion, I'll submit this. This is very dangerous territory we're getting into if we start going back on a lot of the things that many of us in the Old North community sort of take for granted as things that we can rely on. And if you don't want to use the word chilling, that's okay. But to me, I know it's going to be considered chilling. And this is not even a situation where under the new provincial laws, somebody tries to demolish a single-family structure and put up a fourplex under our housing code. This is actually something in a totally different, much larger magnitude than even that. So I guess I've made my point. I'll be urging my fellow councilors to reject the motion that the deputy mayor and Councilor Hillier put on the table. And I think we have to allow the staff and our legal department to just continue going forth on the very, very wise and the very, very prudent track that they've been on so far. So I would urge you to not vote for this. Is this an amendment that's on the floor that Councilor Lewis?
No, this is a motion.
Okay, I would ask you to reject that motion. And after that, maybe we would then discuss about what does this really mean in terms of what's the relationship between what we did today and what's going to happen at the LPAT. But I think that the council has consistently, through the record that has largely been supplemented by people in the neighborhood, based on their own life experience in the neighborhood, they've created a very, very strong record here as to why this application should be denied on many, many legal grounds.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Other comments or questions? We have a motion moved and seconded. I'll ask the deputy mayor to take a chair.
I will take the chair, and I will recognize Councilor Lehman.
Thank you. You know, I understand what the councilor is saying, and I'm aware of that. But in this particular case, I already see this area as a medium density type area. If it was alone in, blocks of single family residences, it might be a different case. But, as the deputy mayor pointed out, there are a number of medium density buildings around the area, including one across the street. So for that reason, I'm going to support the motion. But I do understand what you're saying, Councilor, and if it was, farther in the near campus neighborhood of just purely single-family residences, I might have a different opinion. I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you, Councilor Lehman. I will return the chair to you. I have no one else on your speakers list.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers, we have a motion moved and seconded. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-1.
Okay, we have no items for direction. Oh, just one second. Okay, we're going to have to go back to 3.1. We have to receive the clerk advises me that we have to receive the presentation by Thames Valley. Councillor Rahman moves that, Deputy Mayor seconds, so we'll call that vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, no items for direction. We have 5.1, the deferred matters list. I'll put that on the floor. Deputy Mayor Lewis, you make a motion to receive it? Okay, and Councillor Rahman seconds, and I'll go back to the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Chair, and I will apologize. This is a question I did not get to ask staff earlier, so I'm going to ask them now. This is what happens when I take a long weekend off, is I don't get all these questions written down and submitted in advance. In the deferred matters list, item 5 is due in Q2 of this year. It's the review of the existing housing-related CIPs for opportunities to include and incentivize the creation of affordable housing. I know we're not all the way through Q2 yet. I'm just wondering if there might be any update staff can provide us just verbally right now in terms of are we on track to get a report this quarter? And are we going to see all of it, or will it be part of it? I mean, I know we have got a number of different irons in the fire, rethink zoning's going on, all kinds of other things. So I'm just wondering if there might be a brief verbal on how things are progressing on the CIP incentives for affordable housing.
I'll go to staff.
Through the chair, very good news. We are looking at bringing forward those reports in June. So they're currently in my inbox, so I'll be reviewing them shortly. So thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Well, that's great. I know there's going to be an announcement about a commercial to residential conversion downtown tomorrow. And I know that I very recently met with someone who's just purchased a building on Dundas Place who's interested in potentially developing some residential on their upper floors. So knowing that perhaps some incentives around affordable might be in the near future, that'd be good news to share with our community as well as they're looking at developing those units. Might be great if we could get a couple affordable ones in that mix.
Thank you. Other comments or questions on our deferred matters? They'll open the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. We're now at adjournment. I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Rahman second, hand vote.
The motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks, folks. We're adjourned.